إعلان مهم.
重要提示
Important announcement.
Message important.
Важное объявление.
Anuncio importante.
يرجى من المتحدثين الكرام إلقاء بياناتهم بسرعة معقولة لضمان ترجمة فورية وافية وعالية الجودة.
为了帮助口译准确完整传递发言信息，请代表发言时语速不要过快。
Speakers are kindly reminded to deliver their statements at a reasonable pace to ensure complete and quality interpretation.
Il est rappelé aux orateurs qu'ils doivent présenter leur déclaration à un rythme raisonnable afin de garantir une interprétation complète et de qualité.
Напоминаем ораторам, что для того, чтобы устный перевод был полным и качественным, необходимо выступать в умеренном темпе.
Se ruega a los oradores que pronuncien sus declaraciones a un ritmo razonable para garantizar una interpretación íntegra y de calidad.
Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, let me start by conveying my pleasure in seeing all of you after a bit of break of the Human Rights Council. And it gives me honor and pleasure to welcome Honorable Philemon Wise Emmanuel, Minister of Justice and Labor Relations of Namibia. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, but before we commence with the peer review, let me just officially declare open the 52nd session of the working group of the Universal Periodic Review. And let me also begin by emphasizing the importance and impact of the Universal Periodic Review since its establishment. As a peer review mechanism grounded in cooperation, equality, and universality, I wish to underscore that the active participation of all UN member states is essential to preserve the UPR's credibility and legitimacy. As we move forward in the final phase of its fourth cycle, it is our collective responsibility to safeguard this universality by ensuring continued engagement by all states. At the same time, we must maximize the UPR's impact as a catalyst for progress at the national level, including through strengthened international cooperation and a clear focus on meaningful implementation. I would like to remind that the UPR Knowledge Hub is available as an online repository of technical cooperation and capacity building activities in the implementation of UPR recommendations. As shown on the screen, this Knowledge Hub is accessible through the OHCHR website and can be accessed by scanning the QR code. We invite states to contribute with good, promising, and innovative practices. Now let me turn to the reviews to be held during this working group session. We will begin this session with the review of Namibia this morning, followed by the review of the Niger in the afternoon. I invite all delegations to adhere to the allotted speaking time, which is 1 minute and 5 seconds for the review of Namibia. That's 1 minute and 5 seconds. And to deliver their statement at a reasonable pace in order to ensure quality interpretation services from the interpreters. So it is an art to combine the limited time and clarity in delivery. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, now let me turn to some technical matters to facilitate a more effective review. Delegations are expected to upload their written oral statements through online platform events before the opening of the review they intend to address to facilitate the work of the interpreters, as well as that of the Troikas and the Secretariat for the timely preparation of the working group reports after each review. Additionally, all delegations should ensure that statements are uploaded in Word format so that they are accessible to persons with disabilities. On the conduct of the meeting, speakers are also kindly reminded that recommendations will not be included in the recommendation section of the report unless they are specifically identified as such by the speaker. The working group reports will provide a factual summary of the deliberations. The reports will only reflect what is stated by delegations within the allotted speaking time. All speakers are thus strongly encouraged to deliver their recommendations at the beginning of their statements to ensure that their recommendations are captured within the allotted time. All delegations are also reminded that issues of a political, bilateral, and territorial nature should be kept out of our deliberations. Moreover, United Nations terminology should be used when referring to states and territories. Furthermore, allow me to remind that Council Resolution 16/21 strongly rejects any act of intimidation or reprisals against individuals and groups who cooperate or have cooperated with the United Nations and its representatives and mechanisms in the field of human rights. I thus urge all states to prevent and ensure adequate protection against such acts. I would like to note that delegates from 7 states under review receive financial support to participate in this session through the Voluntary Fund for Participation in the UPR. This voluntary fund, together with the Voluntary Fund for Financial and Technical Assistance for the implementation of the UPR, provides essential support to states, contributing to a more inclusive participation and capacity building at the national level. I would like to express appreciation for the contributions made to those funds so far and encourage all states to make contributions. Before we start with the first review, allow me to recall that states under review have the option of being represented in person in the Assembly Hall or participating virtually through pre-recorded video messages. Recommending states likewise have the opportunity to make their recommendations in person in the Assembly Hall or through pre-recorded video message. Live webcast is available in all 6 official languages during the entire 50-second session of the UPR Working Group. I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to the government of Singapore for its generous support in funding the live broadcasting of the session, of the entire 50-second session of the UPR Working Group. Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, we shall now proceed with the review of Namibia. In accordance with Human Rights Council Resolution 5/1, the review is based on the national report and the compilation of UN information and the summary of stakeholders' information, both prepared by the OHCHR. I now have the honor to give the floor to the Honorable Philemon Wise Emmanuel, Minister of Justice and Labor Relations, who will introduce the delegation and the national report. Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for the honor of the floor to be able to address this 50-second session. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, and representative of the civil society, good morning. Your Excellency, before I get to speak to the substance of my statement, I want you to permit me to introduce the members of the Namibian delegation. You have already done me an honor by putting my name forth to the delegates, but I think it wouldn't do any harm if I repeat that my name is Philemon Wise Emmanuel, and I care for justice and labor relations back home. Now, I don't want to get into conflict with my delegation later on. I will give each one of them a floor just to say their name, and then I will come to deliver my statement, starting with His Excellency the Ambassador.
Distinguished Chair, my distinguished colleague, the Ambassador of Indonesia, my Honorable Minister, and Honorable Shiveta. I think my minister has already indicated that I think we are indeed very privileged to be present here, to be partaking in the UPR. My name is Elvis Shweda, the PR of the Republic of Namibia. I thank you.
Good morning. My name is Bohamba Shveta. I'm a member of Parliament responsible for Standing Committee on Constitutional and Legal Affairs and Petition.
Good morning. My name is Audrey Mate. I'm the Executive Director for the Ministry of Justice and Labor. Thank you.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, my name is Martha Lennon Limbo, Minister of Justice and Labor Relations. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Alan Wendo from the Namibian Police.
Good morning, all. My name is Shamagure from the Ministry of Justice and Labor Relations.
Good morning, all. My name is Albius Mutonga from the National Assembly.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Joanna Shilumbu from the Ministry of Justice and Labor Relations.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Marushka January. I'm representing the Namibian Correctional Service.
Mr. President, I think with the introduction, thank you very much. I want then to indicate that it's indeed an honor for me and for my delegation on behalf of the Republic of Namibia to participate in this 57th session of the Universal Periodic Review Working Group for the considerations of the Namibian National Report. Our delegation, as you may have heard, comprised of senior government officials from key government institutions charged with the mandate of overlooking after the human rights, including the Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Gender Equality and Social Welfare, Ministry of Education, Innovation, Youth, Sport and Culture, Ministry of Health and Social Services, and the Ministry of Home Affairs and Safety and Security, under which the Namibian Police and the Namibian Correctional Services fall, among others. This composition reflects a whole of government approach to the promotions and protections of human rights, and it's for that reason that Parliament is equally represented. The report before you, Mr. President, distinguished delegates, was prepared with the valued support of the Commonwealth Human Rights Department and the Office of Human Rights Regional Office for Southern Africa, Pretoria office, that is. Hence, we express our sincere gratitude to their continued support. Mr. President, Namibia reaffirmed its unwavering commitment to the Universal Periodic Review process and to the principle of universality, equality, and human dignity that underpin the international human rights system. In this regard, I wish to note that it's under the leadership and at the instance of the President of the Republic of Namibia, Dr. Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah, that we appear before this distinguished body to account for our country's implementations of its international human rights obligations. Of particular relevance to this proceeding, Mr. President, Dr. Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah presidency marks a historic and transformative moment for Namibia. For the first time, the country is led by the female president, a female vice president, and the 8 female cabinet ministers, along with other 9 male colleagues that are members of cabinet, resulting in a woman constituting the majority in cabinet. In addition, the Speaker of the National Assembly, the Secretary to Cabinet, and the Secretary General of the ruling party are both women. Equally, a good number of women are members of the National Assembly, with the ruling party represented on a 50-50 basis as a result of its gender representation policy. This level of representation places Namibia among the leading countries in Africa, and globally, there are advanced in human political participation, surpassing the global average of estimate 26% of women in national assemblies. It reflects a clear and tangible evidence of Namibia's commitment at the highest level of governance to address gender disparity and promoting inclusive leadership. Since our last review, Namibia has continued to consolidate democratic governance. The successful conduct of the 2024 Presidential and National Assembly elections, which brought President Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah into office, followed by the regional and local authority elections in 2025, underscore our commitment to democratic participation, accountability, and the rule of law. Today, Mr. President, 4th May is a public holiday in Namibia, commemorating remembrance of the Kasinga massacre. On this day, 4th of May, in 1978, over 600 Namibian refugees, mainly women and children, seeking self-determination, were killed in southern Angola by the then South African apartheid regime. As we honor those who lost their life, we are reminded that our commitment to human rights is rooted in history, marked by injustice and the struggle. The legacy continues to guide our resolve to uphold dignity, equality, and justice for all. And as I indicate this or underscore this, I would like to ask for your indulgence, Mr. President, to kindly invite all those that are able, and condemn the past injustice to join us in observing a moment of silence in solidarity with the Namibian people. May I then ask that we stand and observe a moment of silence in solidarity with the Namibian people.
Let's observe a minute of silence.
You may be seated. Mr. President, as the conversations about human rights continues, we must chart the way forward, but we must borrow from the lesson of the past so that mistakes of the past are not repeated in violations of human rights. Namibia continues to strengthen its alignment with the international human rights standards, and in this regard, in August 2025, Namibia ratified key International Labour Organization convention, including conventions number 190 on violations and harassments in the world of work, as well as convention 156 on workers with family responsibilities, reinforcing protections of workers and promoting dignity in employment. We remain steadfast in advancing gender equality and human empowerment. Namibia hosted the 25th anniversary of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security, and we continue to implement our national action plan alongside the national gender equality and equity policy for 2025 to 2035. Government has adopted legislative policy and institutional measures to prevent human rights violations and combat discrimination, particularly against women and children. At the same time, Namibia acknowledged areas requiring further progress. Work is underway to finalize the legislations to domesticate the provision of the conventions against torture, while the National Action Plan on Trafficking in Persons 2023 to 2027 is being implemented alongside the targeted awareness and capacity building initiatives. Mr. President, Namibia's human rights approach is anchored in social justice and human development. Our social protection system, comprising social assistance, social insurance, and pension schemes, aims to safeguard the dignity and the well-being of all citizens. With the introductions of fully subsidized tertiary education earlier this year, Namibia now provides free education almost at all levels, contributing to a high enrollment rates and expanded access to learning opportunities. We are therefore proud to report that notable progress has been made or been recorded in both education, health, and gender equality, and economic emancipations, as well as political empowerment, reflecting our commitment to building an inclusive and equitable society. Notwithstanding this achievement, Mr. President, dear delegates, we remain cognizant of the persistent challenge, including gender-based violence, violence against children, unemployment rates, income inequality, and poverty. Addressing this challenge remains a national priority, and Namibia's response is guided by the aspiration of the 6th National Development Plan, NDP6, that is, which emphasizes the inclusion, economic growth, strengthened social protection, and human capital development, and the promotions of equality and dignities of all. Through NDP6, we aim to address structural inequality, enhance prevention and response to violence, and expand employment opportunity, particularly for youth and women, to ensure that no one is left behind. Namibia reaffirm its commitment to fulfilling its obligation under the International Human Rights Instrument and continuously improving the lived realities of its people. In this context, we look forward to a constructive yet interactive dialogue and to recommendations to further strengthen our efforts to promote and protect human rights in Namibia. I thank you, Mr. President, and I yield your floor back. Thank you so much.
I thank Your Excellency for your statement. We shall now begin our interactive dialogue. Before giving the floor to delegations for their questions and comments, I would like to remind you that speaking time will be 1 minute and 5 seconds for all. Please be reminded that only the use of the words recommend or recommendation will ensure that the relevant parts of your statement are included in the recommendation section of the working group report. We will now begin with the list of speakers, and I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Senegal.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President. Senegal thanks the delegation in Namibia and notes with interest the efforts deployed since the previous cycle, in particular, further cooperation with treaty body mechanisms, the adoption of several legislative reforms, and the bolstering of policies to combat gender-based violence. Welcome efforts have also been noted on the commitment of the Namibian authorities to promote social development, the protection of vulnerable groups, and strengthening the role of the Ombudsman. And Senegal wishes to make the following recommendations. 1, to pursue and accelerate the process for the adoption of legislative reforms which are pending, in particular those relative to the autonomy of the Ombudsman's office. And 2, to pursue initiatives to guarantee equitable access to basic social services, in particular for women, children, indigenous peoples, and the most disadvantaged communities. Finally, Senegal wishes Namibia every success in implementing those recommendations accepted. Thank you, President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Senegal and now give the floor to the representative of Seychelles.
Thank you, Mr. President. Seychelles welcomes the esteemed delegation from Namibia and thanks it for its presentation of its national report. Seychelles commends the government of Namibia on the adoption and implementation of the National Action Plan on Trafficking in Persons 2023-2027. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, Seychelles offers to Namibia the following recommendation: strengthen measures to ensure that all children have access to quality health services and strengthen efforts to reduce infant mortality rates, accelerate the implementation of programs in place to reduce school dropout rates due to early pregnancy and to promote the readmission of students into school after giving birth. Seychelles wishes Namibia a successful review. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Sierra Leone.
Mr. President, we extend a warm welcome to Honorable Philemon Wise Emmanuel, Minister of Justice and Labor Relations and the delegation of the Republic of Namibia, and thanks them for presenting the national report. In consideration of Namibia's impressive education policies, we offer the following recommendations. 1, continue to strengthen the implementation of free primary and secondary education and ensure the timely and effective rollout of the commitments to introduce free tertiary education. 2, take measures to improve the quality and inclusiveness of education, particularly for children with disabilities and those from marginalized backgrounds. And 3, consider to operationalizing the gender-based violence information management system nationwide. We commend Namibia for its substantial progress in closing the gender gap, especially in education and political empowerment. We also welcome its ongoing efforts to promote equal representation in political decision-making processes. And I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Singapore.
Mr. President, Singapore welcomes the delegation from Namibia. Singapore welcomes Namibia's efforts to tackle gender-based violence, including by significantly increasing the budget of the Ministry of Gender Equality and Child Welfare, amending the Combating of Domestic Violence Act, and establishing 17 gender-based violence protection units throughout Namibia. Singapore recommends Namibia continue to strengthen its efforts to combat gender-based violence. Singapore also welcomes Namibia's efforts to tackle violence against children through the National Plan of Action on Violence Against Children and the National Agenda for Children. Singapore recommends Namibia continues to strengthen its effort to combat violence against children. I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Slovenia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Slovenia thanks the delegation of Namibia for its comprehensive national report and for the constructive engagement in this review. We welcome Namibia's efforts to combat gender-based violence and to promote the rights of women and children. We also note the steps taken to expand access to healthcare services and to address socio-economic inequalities. At the same time, Slovenia recommends Namibia to further strengthen the implementation of existing legislation and policies, particularly in the areas of protection of vulnerable groups and access to justice. Continued efforts to improve detention conditions and to ensure freedom of expression and media independence remain important. In addition, Slovenia respectfully recommends continuation of efforts to prevent and combat gender-based violence, ensuring effective implementation of relevant legislation, policies, and adequate support services for victims. I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of South Africa.
Mr. President, South Africa welcomes the distinguished delegation of the Sisterly Republic of Namibia to this UPR session. My delegation commends Namibia for the strides made in promoting and protecting human rights. We welcome the work undertaken to advance the right to health, including the approval of a universal healthcare coverage policy to guarantee equitable healthcare access. We also acknowledge Namibia's efforts to champion equitable healthcare access at a multilateral level, including through the pathogen access and benefit sharing system, and value our strong partnership in this regard. South Africa wishes to respectfully recommend that Namibia consider the following: strengthen enforcement in ensuring the eradication of harmful practices against women and girls, bolster access for children with disabilities to inclusive education in mainstream schools, and continue to improve conditions in correctional facilities in line with the Nelson Mandela rules. South Africa expresses its solidarity with Namibia on the occasion of the commemoration of the Kasinga massacre. I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of South Sudan.
Mr. President, South Sudan warmly welcomes the distinguished delegation of Namibia, headed by Honorable Philemon Wise Emmanuel, Minister of Justice and Labor Relations. We commend Namibia for its significant strides in closing gender gap by at least 81.1% to be rated as number 8 globally and number 1 in sub-Saharan Africa. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, South Sudan recommends to Namibia the following. 1, consider ratifying the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture. 2, take necessary measures to increase the representation of all indigenous people in governance structures and public administration and ensure their access to health care, education, and employment. 3, continue effort to fully adopt a human rights-based approach to disability, including aligning relevant policies with international standards. Number 4, take measures to accelerate gender parity at the national and local levels of government, in particular in decision-making, judiciary, and the public service. We thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Spain.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, President. Spain wishes a warm welcome to the Namibian delegation. We greet the legislative progress in gender equality, as well as the ruling of the Supreme Court, which decriminalized same-sex relations. Spain recommends, first, to continue progressing with the effective implementation of the equality framework and against GBV, including strengthening protection mechanisms and those of access to justice. Secondly, to promote effective equality and prevent discrimination towards LGBTI+ persons in all spheres, reviewing relevant legislation in line with international human rights obligations. 3, progress towards guaranteeing the rights of persons with disability and their equitable access to services on the basis of the effective implementation of the National Disability Plan 2025. And 4, set up an independent torture prevention mechanism, improving detention conditions and ratifying the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture. We wish them the best in this UPR cycle. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor now to the distinguished representative of Sri Lanka.
Mr. President, Sri Lanka warmly welcomes the delegation of Namibia. We take positive note of the national report presented and appreciate the progress achieved by Namibia in protecting and promoting human rights since the last UPR review. Our full statement will be available on the intranet. In a constructive spirit, Sri Lanka recommends Namibia to 1, consider expediting the process of developing and implementing comprehensive national human rights action plans and programs. 2, further strengthen national efforts to improve access to safe drinking water and sanitation. 3, further accelerate national measures to reduce the maternal mortality ratio. And 4, consider expediting the process of finalizing the data protection bill. We wish Namibia a successful UPR. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the State of Palestine.
Thank you, Mr. President. The State of Palestine welcomes the delegation of Namibia and thanks it for the presentation of their national report. We commend the progress achieved since the previous review, particularly the amendment of the National Disability Council Act and the adoption of the National Disability Policy 2025, as well as Namibia's continued commitment to free education, including the announced phased provision of free Tyrene education from 2026. While noting these important steps, the State of Palestine offers the following recommendations. 1, further strengthen equitable access to quality healthcare services for all children, particularly in rural and marginalized communities. 2, continue efforts in advancing inclusive and accessible education by ensuring the effective integration of children with disabilities into mainstream schools and improving support for indigenous and minority learners, including through multilingual education. 3, continue efforts to strengthen child protection systems, including measures to prevent child marriage and violence against children, and ensure effective support services for survivors. We wish Namibia a successful review. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Sudan.
President, Sudan welcomes the delegation of Namibia headed by Honorable Minister of Justice and Labor Relations. We commend the progress made by Namibia since its last review, including adopting social protection policy, revision of the National Human Rights Action Plan. We also positively note that the national election were successfully organized in 2024. The positive progress of women participation in the governance system is commendable. In the spirit of the constructive dialogue, we recommend the following. Continuing rural community development effort, especially in the area of social services provision, access of water, livelihood improvement, and employment combating and capacity building. Two, continuing it is national policies and program aimed at environment protection and addressing the risk and consequences of climate change. We wish Namibia a successful UBR. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Switzerland.
Monsieur le President, Switzerland welcomes the delegation in Namibia and will make the following recommendations. 1, to ratify the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture and to set up a national mechanism for the prevention of torture. 2, to bolster the effective implementation of the legal frameworks to protect women and girls against gender-based violence, and in relation to this, take the necessary measures to ensure that the perpetrators of this violence be prosecuted and sanctioned. 3, to guarantee universal access, which is safe and non-discriminatory, to sexual and reproductive health services, including access to information and quality services, in particular to avoid unsafe and clandestine abortions. 4, to fully align the legal framework with the decision of the High Court of 2024 through eliminating any provision criminalizing homosexual relations and guaranteeing non-discrimination based on sexual orientation. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor now to the distinguished representative of Tajikistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tajikistan welcomes the distinguished delegation of Namibia and its presentation of the national report and continued engagement in the UPR process. We appreciate Namibia's full cooperation with UN treaty bodies and special procedures, its enactment of several laws, including Third National Gender Equality and Equity Policy and entry into force of the Water Resources Management Act. We, in a constructive spirit, recommend to Namibia to 1, develop new edition of the National Human Rights Action Plan to replace the previous one. 2, finalize, approve, and implement the Ombudsman Bill 2024, given its earlier accreditation as an A status institution. 3, further promote policies aimed at the enhancement of gender equality. We wish the delegation of Namibia a successful review. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Timor-Leste.
Mr. President, Timor-Leste warmly welcomes the delegation of Namibia and commends its strong commitment to the promotion and protection of human rights. Timor-Leste particularly welcomes the following positive development. A, the entry into force of the Water Act in 2023, an important step toward ensuring sustainable water management and access to clean water for all. B, the enactment and promulgations of the regulations of the status of certain residents of Namibia, their descendants and foreign spouses Act 2024. Mr. President, Timor-Leste wishes to make 2 recommendations. First, that Namibia ensures that the children's advocate is provided with sufficient resources. 2, that Namibia continues to take measures to accelerate gender parity at the national and local levels of government. Timor-Leste wishes Namibia every success in its UPR review. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Togo.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Thank you, President. the delegation to Togo, which is a warm welcome to the delegation of Namibia and thanks them for the situation regarding human rights in the country. Togo welcomes the progress achieved by Namibia, in particular as concerns social protection, healthcare, the promotion of gender equality and combating trafficking in persons, combating racial discrimination, gender-based violence, and violence in the school environment. However, in a constructive spirit of dialogue, Togo recommends to Namibia the following. 1, to ratify the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons Against Forced Disappearances. 2, to ratify the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading punishment or treatment. 3, to ratify the International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers and Members of their Family. To conclude, my delegation wishes every success to Namibia in the implementation of recommendations from this review. Thank you, President.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Tunisia.
شكرا سيد الرئيس.
Thank you, President. We welcome the delegation of Namibia and thank them for the national report in this fourth cycle of the UPR. We welcome efforts deployed by Namibia in order to develop its legislature and institutions in order to protect human rights, and we acknowledge its ratification of the ILO Convention Against Violence and Harassment at Work and the other Convention on Family Responsibility, as well as its adoption of gender parity treaty in order to combat all kinds of gender violence. In order to highlight these positive steps, we provide the following recommendations. First, double efforts in order to improve the judiciary and the penal code and provide further support to the judiciary. Second, better management of electronic platforms to protect children against the internet and protect their private life. In closing, we wish Namibia a successful UPR and thank you very much.
I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Turkey.
Thank you, Mr. President. Turkey extends a warm welcome to distinguished Namibian delegation and thanks for their comprehensive and inclusive national report. We commend the considerable efforts of Namibia on the promotion and protection of human rights by implementing the recommendations during the previous cycle. In a constructive spirit, Turkey recommends the following. First, continue efforts to ensure that youth have equal access to quality and free higher and vocational education. Second, develop policies to protect children and youth from online dangers, including the education of children, youth, parents, and teachers on how to recognize and counter these dangers. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Uganda.
Thank you, Mr. President. Uganda warmly welcomes the Minister, Philemon Wise, and his distinguished delegation that we must commend is very intentionally balanced in its constitution. We join our brothers and sisters of Namibia in commemoration of the Kasinga Day that's a stark reminder of the strength of the African people, especially women, in fighting for our independence. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, Uganda would like to make 2 recommendations. 1, continue to put in place measures to eradicate all forms of domestic violence against women and girls. And 2, take appropriate measures to support inclusive development by implementing policies that empower women and the youth in national development programs. We wish our brothers and sisters of Namibia every success. Tangi Unene.
Thank you. And I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Ukraine.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ukraine welcomes the delegation of the Republic of Namibia and thank it for presenting this national report. We commend Namibia's continued cooperation with the United Nations human rights mechanisms and note progress achieved in promoting gender equality and social protection. We also note the work of Ombudsman Office and encourage Namibia to ensure its full financial and operational autonomy in line with Paris principles. In the spirit of constructive engagement, Ukraine would like to make the following recommendations. To consider ratifying core international human rights mechanisms, including the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture, to strengthen efforts to combat gender-based violence, including by ensuring effective access to protection, justice, and support services for victims, to enhance the protection of children's rights, including access to education and health care. We wish the delegation of Namibia a successful review. I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the delegation of the UK.
Thank you, Mr. President. The UK welcomes Namibia's constitutional commitment to human rights and encourages continued progress in delivering equal rights and equal access to services for all. We recommend that Namibia, 1, expand support for survivors of sexual and gender-based violence, improve access to justice and data transparency, and increase sexual and reproductive health services for adolescent girls in rural areas. 2, establish referral procedures for trafficking across the country, train frontline responders and openly publish data on identified victims, referrals, investigations, prosecutions and support provided. And 3, promote LGBT+ equality with anti-discrimination laws, accessible reporting and public data. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Tanzania. Tanzania. I now give the floor.
I'm here. Yeah, we're here. Thank you, Mr. President. The United Republic of Tanzania warmly welcomes the delegation of the Republic of Namibia to this 52nd review session. We commend Namibia's effort to advance gender equality across all sectors and to protect the rights of vulnerable groups, including persons with disabilities, women and children, and encourage continued action to strengthen access to justice. We also welcome progress in increasing female enrollment at all levels of education, including technical and vocational training, and recommend further measures to enhance women's participation in science and technology. We encourage Namibia to implement recommendations from this 4th review cycle and encourage sustained efforts to address youth unemployment. The United Republic of Tanzania wishes the Republic of Namibia a successful review session. I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Uruguay.
Namibia.
And are grateful for the presentation of the report, greeting the efforts made towards the implementation of the recommendations in the previous cycle and the progress made towards recognizing the rights of LGBTIQ+ persons. We urge them to continue in that vein. In the same vein and constructively, we recommend 1, adopt effective measures to prevent violence based on sexual orientation or gender identity and guarantee that all acts of violence are properly investigated and prosecuted. 2, we also urge them to amend the domestic violence law to recognize explicitly same-sex partners and protect LGBTIQ+ persons on an equal footing. And 3, strengthen cooperation with human rights mechanisms and extend an open-ended invitation to the special procedures of the HRC. We wish Namibia all the best in this 4th UPR. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the delegation of Venezuela.
Gracias.
Thank you very much, President. We wish a warm welcome to the Namibian delegation and thank them for their valuable presentation. We appreciate their cooperation with the UPR and believe that voluntary mechanisms and not imposed mechanisms are ones that genuinely contribute to human rights. We recognize their progress on gender equality with better women's representation in the cabinet, as well as the combat against trafficking in persons and protection of early childhood, pursuant to the law for protection and support of children. We constructively recommend the following: strengthen policies to prevent and punish gender-based violence, ensuring that victims have access to justice, as well as shelters and psychosocial support across the whole country. 2, that they redouble their efforts to foster inclusive and quality education for all boys and girls with disabilities, adapting infrastructure, training teachers, and providing appropriate support and materials in mainstream schools. We wish them all the best in their UPR. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Vietnam.
Thank you, Mr. President. Vietnam warmly welcomes the high-level delegation of Namibia to this UPR session. Vietnam commends Namibia for its significant achievements in gender equality and women's leadership. with food parity achieved in health and survival and educational attainment. We also commend Namibia's strong commitment to the right to education, including free primary and secondary education for all children. In a constructive spirit, Vietnam recommends that Namibia, 1, continue to improve the quality of education, including by investing in school infrastructure, teacher training, and inclusive education for all children with disabilities and those in remote areas. 2, accelerate efforts to reduce maternal and neonatal mortality through the full implementation of the National Strategy for Reproductive, Maternal, Newborn, Adolescent Health and Nutrition. Vietnam wishes Namibia every success in its UPR process. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Zambia.
President, Zambia cordially welcomes the distinguished delegation of Namibia to the 4th cycle of the UPR and thanks them for the presentation of their national report. We commend Namibia for its strong legal and policy framework for the promotion and protection of human rights. We welcome the announcement that the government would fully subsidize tuition and registration fees at all state-run universities and vocational training centers from 2026. Zambia further recognizes the efforts made by Namibia to address existing challenges which require sustained resources and coordinated implementation. Therefore, in the spirit of constructive dialogue, Zambia wishes to recommend the following to Namibia. 1, intensify efforts to prevent teenage pregnancy and child marriage, including through community-based interventions. 2, improve equitable access to and retention in quality education, particularly for girls and learners in rural areas. We wish Namibia a successful review. I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Zimbabwe.
Mr. President, Zimbabwe welcomes the delegation of the Republic of Namibia to the review. We commend Namibia for enacting national policies and laws that protect and advance human rights, as well as for the ratification of regional and international protocols and that protect and promote the human rights of its people. In the spirit of dialogue, Zimbabwe recommends the following. Number 1, to ensure that women, persons with disabilities, and the marginalized communities are empowered through the strengthening of its developmental programs and legislation. 2, to continue with the implementation of and strengthening of legislation on gender-based violence against children. 3, to prioritize the strengthening of its social protection policy to ensure reduction of inequalities and improvements of livelihoods of its people, especially women, children, and vulnerable communities. We wish Namibia a successful review. I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Algeria.
Thank you, President. We warmly welcome the delegation of Namibia. We thank them for the presentation of the national report and for their constructive participation in the UPR. We commend progress made since the last cycle, especially when it comes to promoting the institutional framework, promoting gender equality and fighting gender-based violence. We've taken note with great interest of efforts towards facilitating access to justice and expanding social protection with a view to implementing universal health coverage. In a constructive spirit, we recommend 1, strengthening policies to prevent GBV and to sanction the perpetrators and to ensure effective implementation of that policy, to ratify the Convention on Protection of Migrant Workers and members of their families. 3, redouble efforts to improve equal access to potable water, sanitation, and jobs, especially for the most vulnerable. We wish every success to Namibia. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Angola.
Thank you, Mr. President. Angola warmly welcomes the delegation of Namibia and thanks it for the presentation of its national report. Angola recalls its previous recommendations on climate change, awareness, and HIV education, commends Namibia for progress in integrating climate action with human rights, and as well as advances in the response to HIV/AIDS, including efforts to reduce mother-to-child transmission and address stigma. Angola notes that challenges remain and recommends Namibia to: 1, further strengthen ongoing efforts to address climate-related change, particularly for vulnerable communities. 2, continue advancing measures to prevent and respond to gender-based violence. We wish Namibia a successful UPR session. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Armenia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Armenia welcomes the distinguished delegation of Namibia and thanks for constructive engagement with the UPR process. We recognize the government's efforts to advance gender equality, including measures to address gender-based violence. We also welcome steps taken to improve access to education and healthcare services, particularly in rural areas, and initiatives aimed at protecting the rights of children and persons with disabilities. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, we recommend: 1, continue strengthening measures to prevent and respond to gender-based violence, ensuring adequate resources for victim support services. 2, further reinforce the protection of biodiversity by integrating human rights-based approaches into environmental policies, ensuring that conservation efforts respect and support the rights and livelihoods of local communities. Armenia wishes Namibia continued success in its efforts to promote and protect human rights. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Australia.
Thank you, Mr. President. We thank the delegation for its presentation. Australia welcomes Namibia's progress on gender equality in political representation, protection of human rights online, and decriminalisation of LGBTQIA+ identities. Australia remains concerned by rates of gender-based violence, discrimination against LGBTQIA+ persons, and levels of corruption. Australia recommends Namibia: 1, strengthen efforts to combat gender-based violence, including by implementing the 3rd National Gender Equality and Equity Plan. 2, implement the 2024 High Court decision overturning the criminalisation of same-sex relations and adopting legislation prohibiting discrimination on the grounds of sexual orientation. And 3, continue efforts to eradicate corruption, including by providing adequate budget allocations to the Anti-Corruption Commission to investigate and prosecute corruption cases and operationalising the Whistleblower Protection Act. I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Austria.
Thank you, Mr. President. Austria welcomes the delegation of Namibia and thanks them for their report. Austria welcomes the strong constitutional framework protecting human rights, yet we remain concerned about discrimination faced by ethnic minorities. Austria therefore offers the following recommendations. 1, ensure that legally guaranteed rights of ethnic minorities are safeguarded for all concerned communities, especially by providing access to inclusive education, enabling their participation in the national resettlement policy, and halting discrimination of ethnic minorities in the labor market. 2, amend laws that discriminate based on sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression, especially the Labor Act 2007, the Combating of Domestic Violence Act, and the Combating of Rape Act, the Marriage Act 2024, and the Civil Registration and Identification Act 2024. 3, continue the reform measures on gender equality and gender-based violence. 4, ensure women's access to comprehensive sexual and reproductive health care in accordance with the Maputo Protocol and WHO best practices. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Bahamas.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Bahamas warmly welcomes the delegation of Namibia and thanks it for its report. We commend progress since the last review, including the adoption of the Social Protection Policy 2021 to 2030, the approval of a universal health coverage policy framework, legislative amendments addressing gender-based violence, and efforts to expand access to education and housing. To encourage further progress, the Bahamas respectfully recommends that Namibia: 1, strengthen implementation of social protection measures to reduce inequality and expand coverage for vulnerable populations. 2, improve equitable access to healthcare and essential services, particularly in rural and indigenous communities, including through targeted deployment of health personnel and strengthen primary healthcare delivery in underserved areas. And 3, enhance measures to address gender-based violence, including through adequate resourcing of shelters and support services. We wish Namibia every success in this UPR process. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Bahrain.
السيد الرئيس يسرني أن أرحب بوفد جمهورية
Thank you, President. I'd like to wish a warm welcome to the delegation of Namibia, a kindred country. We've taken note of the national report and we commend efforts by Namibia to promote human rights in a constructive spirit. We recommend as follows. 1, continue efforts to fight human trafficking by strengthening capacities of law enforcement agents and implement best international practices. Next, we'll do more to protect rights of children when it comes to right to education. 3, bolster rights of women, guarantee women's participation in all walks of life. In conclusion, we wish every success to Namibia. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Bangladesh.
Thank you, Mr. President. Bangladesh welcomes the distinguished delegation of Namibia to its fourth cycle of UPR. We take note of the implementation of the National Gender Equality and Equity Policy 2025 to 2035 and measures undertaken by Namibia to strengthen social protection. In the spirit of constructive cooperation, Bangladesh recommends the following. First, continue strengthening measures to prevent and respond to gender-based violence, trafficking in persons, and violence against children, including through victim-centered services. Second, enhance equitable access to quality education, healthcare, and social protection, particularly for children, women, and persons with disabilities and rural communities. Third, continue efforts to combat poverty and inequality, including by expanding inclusive development programs for marginalized and rural communities. Fourth, continue improving detention conditions and access to justice, including through alternatives to pre-trial detention and affordable legal aid. We wish Namibia success in its review. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Belarus.
Thank you, President. We welcome the distinguished delegation of Namibia headed by the Justice Minister, Philemon Wise, and we note systemic, consistent work by the government to implement its international commitments in the field of human rights, including relevant legislative measures, strategies, and programs of action. Implementation of the 6th National Development Plan and of the National Policy on Social Protection 2021-30 are important instruments for sustainable economic and social development and improving standard of living. We wish the government of Namibia successful implementation of its plans, and in a spirit of constructive cooperation, we recommend 1, continue strengthening programs of social protection aimed for children. 2, place special emphasis on issues of high quality, accessible education for all levels and development of infrastructure for inclusive education. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Belgium.
Thank you, Mr. President. Belgium welcomes the delegation of Namibia and wishes it a constructive and fruitful UPR. We commend Namibia for its long-standing commitment to the promotion of women's rights and to good governance, as well as for the notable progress achieved since its previous review. Nonetheless, challenges remain, among others regarding the fight against gender-based violence and the adoption of comprehensive anti-discrimination legislation. Belgium therefore recommends the government of Namibia to 1. Adopt comprehensive anti-discrimination legislation that explicitly prohibits discrimination on the grounds of sexual orientation or gender identity. 2. Remove all legal and de facto barriers to the prosecution and punishment of perpetrators of sexual and gender-based violence, including domestic violence, and ensure that survivors receive appropriate support and are protected from stigmatization and reprisals. 3. Ratify the Convention for the Protection of All Persons from a Forced Disappearance. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Brazil.
Brazil.
Thank you, Mr. President. Brazil welcomes the delegation of Namibia and appreciates the presentation of its national report. Brazil notes Namibia's recent efforts to strengthen the protection of persons with disabilities, including the launch of the revised National Disability Policy. In a constructive spirit, Brazil recommends that Namibia, 1, strengthen oversight, training, and accountability mechanisms concerning policy conduct with a view to preventing excessive use of force and ensuring that law enforcement practices are consistent with human rights standards. 2, advance comprehensive policies to combat discrimination and inequalities affecting LGBTQIA+ persons, ensuring equal access to employment and services, while guaranteeing respect for dignity and equality, both in law and in practice. We wish Namibia a successful review. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Bulgaria.
President, Bulgaria welcomes the delegation of Namibia and thanks for the presentation of the national report. Bulgaria notes with appreciation a number of positive developments in the legislative, institutional, and policy framework for protection of human rights in Namibia since the third UPR. We recognize that the country has made significant progress in affirming the right to health of its citizens, marked by key policy initiatives and achievements in public health, such as the launch of the Universal Health Insurance Policy. Bulgaria would like to make the following recommendations to Namibia. 1, make efforts to extend the protection of the right to freedom of expression and privacy to digital spaces. 2, continue implementing measures to expand the scope and strengthen vocational training for girls and women. And 3, take further steps to provide adequate infrastructure, sufficient support materials, and specialized teachers to ensure that all children with disabilities have access to inclusive education in mainstream schools. We thank the delegation of Namibia for successful review. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Burundi.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President. We wish a warm welcome to the distinguished delegation of Namibia and a successful UPR. We commend the policy of social protection underway to confront social shocks, to reduce poverty and inequality, with special emphasis given to vulnerable persons. We commend meaningful progress achieved to guarantee the right to healthcare for all through measures of accessibility to healthcare services, prioritizing women and children. We commend the government on its initiative to subsidize access to universal education at primary and secondary levels, which starting from this year will be extended to the university cycle and to public professional training centers. We have 2 recommendations. 1, continue combating harmful social and traditional practices harmful to the well-being of children, such as forced marriage of minors. 2, continue efforts towards promotion of empowerment of women and their participation in decision-making, and address violence against women, including in rural areas. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cameroon.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President. Cameroon congratulates Namibia for presentation of its national report. We commend progress made in bolstering rule of law, promoting equality between the genders, and sustain efforts when it comes to socioeconomic development and social protection. We take note of ongoing challenges, particularly when it comes to structural inequalities, protection of vulnerable communities, and equitable access to basic social services. In a constructive spirit, Cameroon makes the following recommendations. 1, strengthen policies to reduce socioeconomic inequalities, particularly by improving equitable access to healthcare, education, and key services for marginalized populations. 2, continue efforts to protect the rights of indigenous peoples and marginalized communities by guaranteeing their effective access to resources, to public services, and to participation in decision-making. Cameroon reaffirms its support to Namibia and wishes it a successful review. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to a distinguished representative of Canada.
Thank you, Mr. President. Canada thanks Namibia for its engagement in this Universal Periodic Review and welcomes steps taken to advance gender equality, including its 3rd National Gender Equality and Equity Policy. Canada recommends that Namibia, 1. Develop clear protocols to improve reporting, investigations, and prosecution of perpetrators of gender-based violence, including awareness campaigns to reduce stigma and training for police and judiciary personnel. 2. Adopt measures to address discrimination and ensure equal access to formal work and social services for Indigenous peoples, and particularly Indigenous women and girls. And 3, amend legislation to ensure non-discrimination for LGBTQI+ persons, including the legal recognition of same-sex marriage in line with constitutional protections and international human rights commitments. Canada encourages Namibia to further engage youth in democratic and political processes by fostering greater awareness of their rights and creating more opportunities for meaningful participation. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Chad.
Merci, Monsieur le
Thank you, President. Chad thanks the Namibian delegation for presenting its national report and for its ongoing commitment to the UPR mechanism. We applaud progress made by the Namibian government, especially in the fields of social protection, education, and combating human trafficking, despite numerous challenges, especially when it comes to socioeconomic inequalities. In a spirit of constructive dialogue, Chad recommends respectfully to Namibia as follows. 1, step up measures to reduce socioeconomic disparities, particularly by improving access to basic services. 2, step up action to prevent and combat gender-based violence. 3, consolidate the independence and capacities of the national human rights institutions. Chad wishes Namibia a successful review. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Chile.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, President. We welcome the delegation of Namibia and congratulate them for their measures to improve participation of women in decision-making posts, highlighting the increase of women's political representation in the parliament, standing at about 50%. In the spirit of continuing to cooperate in promoting human rights, Chile recommends to Namibia as follows. 1, criminalize torture as a standalone crime in national legislation. 2, guarantee implementation of the law on protection and care of childhood, and assess the existing normative framework and its implications for the effective protection of the rights of the child. 3, ratify the Convention on Stateless Persons with a view to regulating their legal status and in turn ensure the rights of those lacking nationality. 4, guarantee future implementation of the law on the Cybercrime Act and ensure that it has legal safeguards to prevent arbitrary surveillance, protect freedom of the press and avoid criminalization of digital activism. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of China.
主席先生，中方赞赏纳米比亚认真落实
China welcomes considerable efforts made by Namibia for implementing the recommendations from the last UPR. Positive progress has been achieved in promoting and protecting human rights and sustainable development. Thanks to laws and policies adopted, it's committed to promoting gender equality, to eliminate violence against women, protect fundamental rights such as right to education and the right to a decent standard of living. We make the following 2 recommendations. 1, continue to eradicate poverty, improve well-being of the people through sustainable socioeconomic development. 2, pursue international cooperation in medicine and healthcare, drawing on best practices of other countries in prevention and management of infectious diseases. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Colombia.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, President. Colombia would like to welcome the distinguished delegation of Namibia and commends its commitment to its agenda on women, peace and security and efforts in the face of GBV. We take this opportunity and in a constructive spirit, we recommend 1, strengthen provision of sexual reproductive healthcare services with an emphasis on human rights, integrating family planning, maternal health, prevention of HIV and prevention and care for GBV. to strengthen action to boost access for women to land, especially for rural women and indigenous women. 3, consider the possibility of providing a standing invitation to Human Rights Council Special Procedures mandate holders and positively receive offers of visits from special mandate holders whose requests for visits are still pending. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Congo.
Merci, Monsieur. Thank you, President. The Republic of Congo wishes a warm welcome to the Namibian delegation. We congratulate them for the presentation of the national report. My country notes with satisfaction significant progress made by Namibia in promoting and protecting human rights. Congo would like to encourage Namibia to place special emphasis on budgetary credits allocated to social protection programs for children. We recommend to Namibia as follows. 1, redouble efforts to improve detention conditions in penitentiary establishments in step with the minimum rules of the United Nations for treatment of detainees. 2, step up outreach activities in fighting all forms of discrimination, as well as reporting of cases of trafficking of women and girls in rural areas. 3, redouble efforts to encourage entrepreneurship of youth in rural areas. Finally, Congo wishes every success to Namibia in this UPR. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Costa Rica.
Señor Presidente.
Thank you, President. Costa Rica welcomes the presentation of Namibia's national report, and we recognize their commitment to the human rights system, and we make the following recommendations. 1, step up the institutional response to all forms of gender-based violence through assigning sustainable financial resources for victim protection mechanisms and for implementation of national programs on comprehensive sexual education with a view to reducing inequality gaps and preventing teen pregnancy. 2, guarantee free of charge compulsory education for all children through equitable access to high quality education. 3, advance in ratification and implementation of ILO Convention 169, the Convention Against Enforced Disappearance, and the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhumane, degrading treatment or punishment. We wish Namibia a successful implementation of the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Côte d'Ivoire.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President. Côte d'Ivoire would like to wish a warm welcome to the delegation of Namibia, and we thank them for the presentation of the national report. My country congratulates Namibia for implementation of its national plan for combating human trafficking, as well as for launching its social protection policy 2021-30. It also commends the enactment of the national plan 2019-2023 for combating GBV. Here are the following recommendations that we'd like to make that we trust will be constructive. 1, ratify the International Convention for Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance. 2, ratify the 1954 Convention on the Status of Stateless Persons. 3, ratify the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhumane, degrading treatment or punishment. In conclusion, Côte d'Ivoire wishes every success to the delegation of Namibia. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to His Excellency, Minister Philemon Wise Emmanuel, Minister of Justice and Labor Relations of Namibia. You have the floor, Excellency.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for giving me the floor back to respond to some of the recommendations that has been sponsored by the delegates. Mr. President, you would agree with me that the recommendations were multiple, and as such, the formula that or modality that we are going to adopt is that I will yield the floor, to some members of my delegation. So in responding, to some of the recommendation, but I think Also, it would be in the interest of the proceeding of this session if we classify, issues into, some thematic areas, because some of them were similar, in form and in substance. Majorities of the recommendations, Mr. President, speaking to issues of equality, gender equality, speaking to issues of social welfare in terms of education, social protection, as well as issues of opportunity, for all, as well as access to health. Others were speaking to issues of environmental protection, and through the protections of the environmental ecosystem, then a better living standard would emanate from there. And others were speaking to the need of strengthening the violence against women as well as children, and then by far and large, also bordering on the safeguard that are required to protect children as well as the marginalized or vulnerable members of society. Now, when you look at those issues, as I have pigeonholed them, Mr. President, you would see that the Namibian government is way, way far ahead. Because if one has regard to Article 95 of the Namibian Constitution, which speaks to state policy, we have already committed ourselves as a nation in terms of that article, that we want all those utilities and benefit for our citizens. The only limitation, as the case may be at the moment, why probably we have not attained a full realizations of those aspirations as contained under Article 95 of the Namibian Constitution. It has really to do with either, limited resources from the financial perspective, as well as from the human capital perspective. Hence, then all those recommendations that speaks to how we should strengthen that, we would, note them, and those that speaks to what we are already busy with, indeed, such as the one of operationalizing the full independence, or realizing the full independence of the ombudsman. So that we would note, because in any event, we are already in the process of making sure that the ombudsman bill makes its way to Parliament for tabling at least before the end of this financial year. On issues of torture, as well as the rectifications of various conventions, speaking to, among others, stateless person, as well as forced disappearance. I think, again, it's important for us to note that insofar as the torture bill is concerned, we have already started with those consultations, and the bill has actually been set into motion insofar as the formulation is concerned. The were consultations equally on the stateless persons bill at an advanced stage at the national level, and then I think we are certain that once those consultations are finalized, we will probably then be able to determine so the way forward with regard to that. Hence, it's warrants that we equally note that. The issue, or perhaps also of importance, is the fact that when you look at any recommendations that falls within the pigeonhole of cruel treatment or inhuman treatment, I think it's important for this session to note that in terms of our constitutional order, our constitution is very clear insofar as Article 10 of the Namibian Constitution is concerned, guaranteeing equality before the law for every person, for all persons, and preventing, discrimination, against anyone, on the basis of sex, race, color, ethnic origins, religion, creeds, or social economic status. Our constitution has clearly already committed us as a nation to those principles. Just before I have then give the floor, to other members of the delegation to address some specific issue, it's also important to indicate to this forum that we have a universal health coverage policy in place already as a country. And in fact, for what it's worth, it's important also to note that effective from the 1st of April 2026, there is a policy directive that has been given by our head of state directing that all senior public servants, including ourselves as ministers, and everybody senior in government, must start using the public health facility. The reason for doing that, or for that specific policy directive from our head of state, is really to make sure that money, public money that are often spent, in private in private medical facilities, are rechanneled, towards improvement in the public health facility, where the ordinary Namibians go for medical assistance or for medical attention. So that policy directive has since been implemented, and it's in full operations back home, and we are all using the public facility as a result of that. Perhaps the last ones that I want to comment on, Mr. President, of course, with a precursor that the recommendation in relation to this specific issue are noted. And then I want to amplify by saying that the issue of the judgment of May 2024 on the same-sex marriage, it's an issue that is a subject to a hot debate back home. Subject to a hot debate back home, for obvious reason, because some quarters or sections of the society, are demanding that the government should put in place policies or law that somehow seek to give or to give a full realization to same-sex marriage. Some other members of society believe otherwise, arguing strongly that it's an issue that must be measured against the moral conviction of the society, against the cultural context of the society, and against the societal belief that has guided Namibia over a period of time. And for those reasons alone, the position of government is that we shouldn't settle these specific questions in a rush, but there must be thorough consultation to make sure that eventually it leaves the Namibian nation standing, you know, as opposed to rushing into it when thorough consultation on what is that the society want, because in any event, we remain a democratic society. That's why in everything that we have done so far, from 1990 after gaining independence, we have done it on democratic principles. And that's what has actually binded our nation together. And we plead, you know, with all those that have interest in the domestic affairs of Namibia to at least respect the position that we need thorough and extensive consultation insofar as the issue of the same-sex marriage or the LGBTQ issue is concerned. So I will yield the floor with your permission, you know, Mr. President, to the other members of the delegation, starting with His Excellency, the Ambassador. Okay. Edie, over to you and the team.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Just one issue regarding the status of the data protection. Indeed, that is supported. Work is in progress. Hopefully, before the end of the year, the data protection bill will be in Parliament. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to respond to the advanced questions that were tendered to Namibia, and starting with a question from Canada regarding the third National Gender Equality and Equity Policy of 2025 to 2035. Namibia is implementing the policy of the National Gender Equality and Equity Policy, and this policy is anchored in Article 10 of the Namibian Constitution, which states that all persons shall be equal before the law. No person may be discriminated against on the grounds of sex, race, color, ethnic origin, religion, creed, or social or economic status. The policy is aligned with the provisions of various regional and global commitments on gender equality. The implementation of the NGEEP policy includes capacity building and reporting mechanisms to eliminate aspects of discrimination and gender-based violence, ensuring equal participation for all. The policy developed 6 implementing clusters, which are responsible for implementing the various strategies. The function of the implementing clusters is to report on progress made on the implementation of the NGEEP policy. And this is for the financial year 2025-2026. There was a question about the Ombudsman's Bill from Germany. The Ombudsman's Bill was drafted and tabled in Parliament during 2025. The bill was withdrawn from Parliament for further consultations and awaits retabling. The government took note of the ratification of Indigenous and Tribal Peoples Convention, ILO Convention 169. The said convention did not enjoy the state's support, and the position remains the same. Consequently, the convention was not ratified. There was also a question from Germany on what measures are planned to protect women and children against gender-based violence, teenage pregnancies, and child marriages. In response, the government has taken the following key measures. I also want to state that there were a number of similar questions from distinguished delegates of other states that have asked the same. To respond, the government has amended and promulgated legislation to address gender-based violence and violence against children. These include the Combating of Rape Amendment Act of 2022, the Combating of Domestic Violence Amendment Act of 2022, and the Child Care and Protection Act of 2015. Furthermore, a national action plan on gender-based violence is in place. The National Training Manual and Resource Kit on Gender-Based Violence is as well in place. The National Plan of Action on Violence Against Children. Namibia also has a training manual on child maltreatment for health service providers, which was developed and is being implemented. In the Republic of Namibia, victims may apply for protection orders in cases of violence, harassment, and threats of violence. Furthermore, as indicated by some of the delegates, the government has established 17 gender-based violence protection units in 14 regions of Namibia. The government has also appointed a number of gender liaison officers in all 14 regions to address GBV at a regional level and sensitize community members on a daily basis on GBV. Coordination of GBV interventions is done through national and regional GBV clusters. The gender-based violence and violence against children standard operating procedures were developed and implemented. Furthermore, Namibia intensified the hashtag #EndGBV campaign hashtag, which was conducted online and offline. The National Plan of Action for Prevention and Responding to Violence Against Children for the period 2021-2025 was developed, which contains strategies to help address violence against children. The government, in collaboration with stakeholders, implemented engagement programs with various traditional authorities, especially the Ovatwe, Ovahimba, marginalized communities living in the remote areas of the Kunene region. There were other questions, and from Liechtenstein, we had a question requesting whether we have taken steps to ratify the Kampala amendments to the Rome Statute on the crime of aggression. The recommendation was noted by the Republic of Namibia during the previous cycles. The government has attended several meetings on the subject matter. However, Namibia's position regarding amendments, the said amendments, has not changed. Another question from Liechtenstein: what steps has Namibia taken to ratify optional protocol, OPCAT, on Convention Against Torture? The government has not yet, in response, the government has not yet taken steps to ratify the optional protocol of the Convention Against Torture. With regards to the protocol against illicit manufacturing of trafficking in arms, the government has taken a decision to ratify the said protocol and directed line ministries to start the ratification process. With regard to a question on whether Namibia has taken steps to join the Code of Conduct regarding Security Council action against genocide, crimes against humanity, or war crimes, the government is not a state party to the Code of Conduct. However, the government continues to support international efforts against genocide and crimes against humanity, and it advocates for global peace. More questions from Slovenia. There was a question from Slovenia regarding combating of ageism and to eliminate age discrimination in all its forms and to protect the human rights of older persons. Older persons are protected by the Constitution, the National Welfare Act, the National Pension Act, and all laws which prohibit criminal conduct against all persons. Old persons are provided free public health care and universal old age grants. Additional measures include subsidized care facilities for the elderly and awareness campaigns on World Elder Abuse Prevention Day and commemoration of the International Day of Older Persons. The Criminal Procedure Act proscribes criminal offenses which protect all persons living in the Republic of Namibia against violent conduct, including older persons. Frail care facilities are licensed and regulated in terms of the Hospitals and Health Facilities Act. The regulations made in terms of the Act states that a person who is receiving a basic state pension under the National Pensions Act must receive free medical treatment. Namibia has made significant progress in access to health, quality service delivery, and affordability of health services. Primary health care are widely available in the country, and public health services are free. 76% of the population lives within 10-kilometer radius of a health facility, and the construction of more health facilities is in progress. Namibia is also a signatory to the African Union Convention on the Rights, Care, and Protection of Old Persons. Therefore, we are in the final stages of ratifying the convention by developing the national policy on the rights, care, and protection of older persons in Namibia. The United Kingdom and of Great Britain and the Northern Ireland had a question regarding whether Namibia has taken steps to ensure survivors of sexual and gender-based violence can access protection services and justice equally, and whether Namibia has targets to report against. In response, Namibia will report on the following targets: increasing reporting and conviction rates, and reduced backlog of cases; to improve survivor satisfaction and service reach; improve access to justice by victims of gender-based violence; measure the number and effect of awareness campaigns conducted by members of the Gender-Based Violence Protection Division; measure, monitor, and evaluate effectiveness and comprehensiveness of services offered to victims of sexual as well as gender-based violence; monitor the number of gender-based violence victims placed at the gender-based violence protection units in all 14 regions of Namibia. Survivors are provided access to psychosocial support as well as medical support and provision for temporary shelter. The second question was whether Namibia is going to implement a national strategy plan to ensure adolescent girls, especially in rural areas, have equal access to sexual and reproductive health information and services. The government developed and revised the national strategy on reproductive, maternal, newborn, child, and adolescent health and nutrition of 2025-2030. After a thorough review of women and children and adolescent health and nutrition in Namibia, as well as the results from the second National Emergency Obstetric and Neonatal Care Assessment, the health system review during 2021, the review of and after the review of the fifth National Development Plan. The strategy has primary targets as well as an implementation and coordination framework with structures such as the National Steering Committee, National Technical Working Group, and regional committees at community level. Each level will develop annual plans on the implementation of the strategy, which will be incorporated by all stakeholders, and the Ministry of Health and Social Services will facilitate the implementation reporting. This strategy is implemented at rural level through the above-mentioned structures, and quarterly reports are provided on implementation. The third question was with regards to the measures Namibia is taking in implementing to identify, refer, and support trafficking victims across the nation, and what outcomes are expected to be reported under the 2023 to 2027 Anti-Trafficking National Action Plan. In response, the legal framework governing Namibia's response to trafficking in persons is the Combating of Trafficking in Persons Act and the National Referral Mechanism and Standard Operating Procedures for the identification, referral, protection, and safe return of victims of trafficking in Namibia. The government provides services such as shelters, psychosocial support, medical, and legal services for victims of trafficking in persons. The National Coordinating Mechanism, called the National Coordinating Body on Trafficking in Person, is in place to ensure effective and timeous coordination among stakeholders, as well as to report on the implementation of the National Action Plan on Trafficking in Persons for the period 2023 to 2027. Measures to deal with trafficking in persons include improved victim identification and support, capacity building for officials, strengthened coordination and data systems, enhanced prosecution, and resource mobilization. Furthermore, the National Action Plan for Combating Trafficking in Persons has a number of outcomes. And for purposes of this dialogue, it will be too numerous to mention. The fourth question is with regards to what actions will Namibia take to further LGBTQ+ human rights. The Namibian Constitution prohibits discrimination on the grounds of sex, race, color, ethnic origin, religion, creed, or social or economic status. Furthermore, the Labour Act prohibits discrimination based on the following: race, color, ethnic origin, sex, marital status, family responsibilities, religion, creed, or political opinion, as well as social and economic status, degree of physical or mental disability, AIDS or HIV status, as well as previous, current, or future pregnancy. The Honorable Minister has gone to a great length explaining this particular response on LGBTQI+ issues. The other question was, how will Namibia promote equality and inclusion for indigenous people by safeguarding land rights, guaranteeing free, prior, and informed consent for projects on indigenous lands, and improving access to justice despite language and distance barriers? To respond to that, the government has established the directorate within the Office of the Vice President to deal with marginalized communities. The government recognizes marginalized communities, and there are specialized programs designed to support them. Measures to promote equality and inclusion for indigenous people include to safeguard land rights for the Namibian people, including the marginalized communities. The government convened a second National Land Conference, which was held in 2018. With the main objective of reviewing the progress made towards the implementation of the 24 resolutions of the 1991 National Conference on Land Reform and the Land Question in Namibia. 2 of the resolutions of the 2018 Second National Land Conference are addressing the land challenges of indigenous people in Namibia. These resolutions are as follows: to develop a policy to ensure the prioritization of various categories of disadvantaged communities in land reform programs. B, to review and harmonize all legal instruments related to disadvantaged communities. To guarantee free, prior, and informed consent for projects on indigenous lands. All projects which are developed on indigenous land are subject to compliance with the Environmental Management Act. The Act provides that community involvement in natural resource management and the sharing of benefits arising from the use of these resources must be promoted and facilitated. It also provides that the participation of all interested and affected parties must be promoted, and decisions must take into account the interest, needs, and values of interested and affected parties. To improve access to justice, the government offers legal aid to indigenous people who cannot afford private legal representation, and most towns have magistrates' courts. Namibia has a total of 104 magistrates' courts, which are composed as follows: 9 regional courts, 21 circuit regional courts, 37 district courts, and 37 periodic courts. All courts offer and are required to employ the services of a translator or interpreter during court proceedings to ensure that applicants or defendants understand the proceedings in their language. There was a question from Belgium with regards to whether Namibia is considering ratifying the International Convention for the protection of all persons from enforced disappearance. The government took note of this recommendation during the previous cycle, and the position remains the same. Belgium also had asked whether Namibia is considering issuing a standing invitation to UN special procedures mandate holders. The government, in response, the government fully cooperates with treaty bodies and special procedures of the United Nations. Third question from Belgium was, how is Namibia addressing technology-facilitated gender-based violence, including through legislative measures and through awareness-raising campaigns targeting users and digital platforms? The government has launched the End GBV campaign in June 2025 in Windhoek. The campaign was carried out in all 14 regions of Namibia. The campaign advertisements were aired on radio across the 14 regions of Namibia, as well as on social media, such as Facebook, which attracted 1.5 million views and 500,000 views on Instagram, 96,000 views on TikTok by the end of August 2005. Male engagement sessions, including men's conference, community engagements targeting men and boys, as well as the ministries responsible, all male staff members were engaged and conferences were held with. The commemoration of the national and international days, such as World Day Against Trafficking in Persons, the launch of the 16 Days of Activism Against GBV, commemorated under the theme Unite to End Digital Violence against all women and girls, as well as the International Human Rights Day, Women's Day, International Day, Women's Day, were carried out throughout the country. Community outreach awareness sessions focused on GBV and trafficking in persons were also conducted. 19,682 community members were reached through implementation of the GBV and trafficking in persons interventions. I conclude. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. We will now continue with our interactive dialogue, and I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cuba.
Thank you very much, President. I'd like to wish a warm welcome to the kindred delegation of Namibia, headed by His Excellency Philemon Wise Emmanuel, Minister of Justice and Labour Relations. We acknowledge the country's commitment to the UPR, which shows the political will of the government to move forward in the field of human rights. We congratulate Namibia for the tangible progress made in promoting the right to healthcare. We recognize the approval in 2024 of the universal healthcare coverage policy. In a constructive spirit, we recommend 1, continue efforts to implement the national strategy for reproductive, maternal, neonatal health of adolescents and nutrition. 2, continue implementing the national development plan focused on recovery and economic resilience. We wish Namibia every success in this review and in implementing the recommendations agreed to. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cyprus.
Thank you, Mr. President. Cyprus warmly welcomes the delegation from Namibia and thanks them for the presentation of their report. We would like to commend Namibia for the progress made since the last review, especially as regards efforts to address gender-based violence, as well as significant progress in the areas of health and access to education, especially for persons with disabilities. We also welcome the recent court ruling on the decriminalization of same-sex relations. Cyprus would like to offer the following recommendations. 1, consider ratifying the optional protocol to CAT. 2, continue strengthening the national referral mechanism and provide victims of trafficking with access to shelters, as well as medical, psychosocial, and legal assistance. 3, continue enforcing measures to end child poverty and ensure the rights of all children to an adequate standard of living. 4, continue enforcing legal protection against all forms of gender-based violence and ensuring rural women's access to social protection and basic services. We wish Namibia a successful review. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. President. The delegation of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea warmly welcomes the delegation of the Republic of Namibia to this UPR cycle. We commend the government of the Namibia for its efforts and progress in promotion and protection of human rights by implementing the National Plan of Action on Women, Peace and Security 2019 to 2024 and the National Gender Equality and Equity Policy for 2025 to 2035 since the previous cycle. In the spirit of constructive engagement, we wish to offer the following recommendations. 1. Continue efforts to promote sustainable economic and social development by developing and implementing comprehensive national development policies and plans. 2. Further strengthen its efforts for fighting against the poverty and promotion of access to health and education in cooperation with relevant UN agencies and other partners. We wish Namibia every success in UPR process. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Djibouti for a video.
Thank you, President. Djibouti welcomes the delegation, which is a high-level one from Namibia, and thanks them for presenting their national report. We welcome measures adopted by Namibia to promote human rights through strategies and internal legislation adoption, with many measures targeting children, women, elderly persons and persons with disabilities, and through strengthening the combat against poverty and in promoting the right to health, education and employment. We recommend the following. 1, to continue to bolster the role and build capacity of child protection systems, preventing trafficking in children, and adopting all necessary measures to combat child exploitation. 2, to pursue efforts to achieve social development, guaranteeing access of citizens to all basic services without discrimination, in particular health care, and reducing dependence on external financing. Finally, we wish Djibouti every success in this review. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Dominican Republic for a video presentation.
Thank you. President, Dominican Republic cordially welcomes the distinguished delegation of the Republic of Namibia. We congratulate them for presenting the national report and the commitment to the UPR mechanism. We recognize the efforts made by Namibia to bolster the struggle against corruption and consolidate institutional transparency. In the spirit of constructive dialogue and cooperation, we recommend 1, ratify the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhumane, degrading treatment or punishment. 2, enact the bill on data protection in line with international standards. Finally, 3, intensify outreach work to encourage reporting of cases of trafficking of women and girls. Streamline legal proceedings and bolster cooperation with countries of origin, transit and destination. The Dominican Republic wishes Namibia a successful UPR. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Ecuador.
Señor Presidente.
Thank you, President. Ecuador extends a cordial welcome to the delegation of Namibia. We thank them for the report and highlight inter alia approval of the policy of universal healthcare coverage to guarantee free of charge equitable access to healthcare services for all the population. In a constructive spirit, we recommend 1, ratify the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhumane, degrading treatment or punishment. 2, continue bolstering measures to ensure that all children with disability have access to an inclusive education and expand options for multilingual high-quality education. 3, initiate participative research and investigation into communities and contexts where practices such as polygamy, violent sexual initiation persist, as well as using children for sexual purposes. And with that, Ecuador wishes every success to Namibia in this 4th review cycle. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Egypt.
شكرا.
Thank you, President. We welcome the delegation of Namibia and thank them for the report. We acknowledge the progress achieved, particularly through the adoption of various policies and plans on human rights and enforcing gender parity and empowering women, together with the legislative reforms on the family and combating human trafficking while cooperating with international human rights mechanisms. We tabled the following recommendations. Firstly, ratifying the International Convention on the Rights of Migrant Workers. Secondly, developing human rights institutional and legislative framework on the rights of refugees and asylum seekers. Thirdly, expedite efforts to establish ombudsman and ensure its alignment with Paris principles. In closing, we thank you and wish Namibia the best in this UPR cycle, and thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Equatorial Guinea.
Thank you, President. The delegation of Equatorial Guinea welcomes the distinguished delegation of Namibia, and we thank them for the presentation of the report. We commend the government's efforts to align their legislation with international standards through the law on child protection and care. In a constructive spirit, my delegation recommends as follows. 1, fast track the draft law against torture, guaranteeing that the new legal framework establishes effective proportional sanctions. 2, strengthen measures to eliminate legal ambiguity over corporal punishment in the home, guaranteeing an explicit prohibition that protects the dignity of the child in all spheres. In conclusion, my delegation wishes Namibia a successful UPR, and we reaffirm our support and implementation of these improvements. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Eritrea for a video statement.
Thank you, Mr. President. We warmly welcome the distinguished delegation of the Republic of Namibia. We commend Namibia's progress in advancing the right to health through the 2024 Universal Health Coverage Policy, expanded HIV treatment coverage, and improved access to health facilities. We recommend the following. 1, strengthen efforts to reduce maternal and neonatal mortality by improving access to skilled birth attendance, emergency obstetric care, and reproductive health services, particularly in rural areas. 2, promote equity in education by improving school infrastructure and ensuring adequate deployment of teachers in rural and underserved areas. We wish Namibia continued success in implementing its accepted recommendations and in advancing the human rights and well-being of its population. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Estonia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Estonia welcomes the delegation of Namibia to its 4th UPR. We commend Namibia's efforts to address gender-based violence and promote women's participation. We also welcome the adoption of the Access to Information Act, strengthening the media framework. Estonia further welcomes the Supreme Court decision to decriminalize same-sex relations and encourages Namibia to continue its efforts in this direction. Estonia recommends that Namibia, 1, align children's rights legislation, namely Child Care and Protection Act, with international standards, including a clear definition of the child minimum age of marriage and prohibition of corporal punishment. 2, strengthen capacity to provide rights-based sexual and reproductive services, integrating family planning, maternal health, HIV prevention, and gender-based violence prevention and response, prioritizing adolescents and youth. 3, ratify the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture. We wish Namibia a successful review. I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Mozambique.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mozambique welcomes the high-level delegation from its sister country, Namibia, and congratulates it on the presentation of its national reports within the framework of the 4th cycle of the OPR. Mozambique commends the government of Namibia for its continued commitment to cooperating with the international human rights mechanisms, as well as for its efforts to increase the participation of women in politics, particularly in key decision-making bodies. Namibia is a living example of the integration of women into the country's political life, being one of the few countries in the world to have a woman as a head of state. In a spirit of constructive engagement, Mozambique would like to offer the following recommendations. One, strengthen the promotion of the people's well-being by adopting policies that address the impact of climate change on the promotion and protection of human rights. Two, continue efforts to combat gender-based violence against women and children. And three, continue to cooperate within the international human rights mechanisms. Mozambique wishes Namibia every success in this UPR review process. I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Ethiopia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ethiopia warmly welcomes the high-level delegation of Namibia and thanks it for the presentation of its comprehensive national report. We commend Namibia for its continued commitment to promotion and protection of human rights. Ethiopia particularly recognizes progress made in strengthening legal and institutional frameworks and promoting socio-economic development. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, Ethiopia offers the following recommendations. One, continue efforts to promote gender equality and combat gender-based violence. Two, continue strengthening measures to enhance youth employment and socio-economic inclusion. Three, continue improving access to equal education, health care services, particularly in rural areas. In conclusion, Ethiopia wishes Namibia a successful review. I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Finland.
Mr. President, Finland welcomes the engagement of Namibia to the UPR and commends the 2024 Supreme Court decision decriminalizing same-sex relations and looks forward to the implementation and policy alignment accordingly. We also commend the progress in advancing gender equality, including women's leadership at the highest levels of government. Finland recommends Namibia to 1, adopt effective measures against sexual and gender-based violence by enforcing existing laws, strengthening survivor-centered policy and social services, expanding shelters and support services, and providing comprehensive sexuality education for all, including children. 2, to reinforce equality and non-discrimination by strengthening legal and policy frameworks that protect individuals from discrimination and violence based on sexual orientation and gender identity in law and in practice. We wish Namibia a successful review. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of France.
Thank you, President. France welcomes the delegation in Namibia and thanks them for their report. France recommends 1, to ratify the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons Against Enforced Disappearances, as well as the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhuman or degrading punishment or treatment. 2, to pursue efforts to promote and protect the rights of women and girls, in particular through implementing the dedicated laws adopted in 2024. 3, to strengthen child protection measures, in particular those aiming to detect and prevent child labour and the sexual exploitation of children. And 4, to pursue efforts for the protection of the rights of LGBT+ persons, respecting the relevant decisions of the Supreme Court and encouraging adoption of a draft law on combating discrimination, discriminatory harassment and hate speech. And we wish Namibia every success in this review. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Gambia.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Gambia welcomes the delegation of Namibia to this 4th UPR review cycle. We commend Namibia for its impressive efforts to enhance gender equality in political and decision-making roles, the fulfillment of its international human rights reporting obligations, and the success registered in school enrollment rates for children. We further applaud Namibia for its promise to provide free tertiary education to its citizens. In the spirit of constructive engagement, my delegation makes the following recommendations. 1, expedite efforts to promulgate the revised bill on preventing and combating torture. 2, strengthen efforts to tackle gender-based violence by ensuring the prosecution of offenders and the provision of appropriate remedies and support services for victims. And 3, strengthen social and economic reforms to reduce economic inequality among the population. We wish Namibia every success in implementing its human rights commitments. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Georgia welcomes the delegation of Namibia and thanks the head of the delegation for the presentation of the national report. My delegation positively notes measures taken since the last cycle with the aim of further advancing the human rights in the country. Georgia welcomes the announcement by the President of Namibia that the government would fully subsidize tuition and registration fees at all state-run universities and vocational training centers from 2026. We positively note the approval of universal health coverage policy and call on the government to continue efforts aimed at strengthening the health system. In a constructive spirit, we recommend to the government of Namibia, first, to further strengthen anti-trafficking policies, and second, to continue measures aimed at harmonizing national legislation with CRPD. We wish the government of Namibia a successful UPR. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Germany.
Mr. President, Germany welcomes the delegation of the Republic of Namibia. We highly appreciate Namibia's consistent engagement with the UN. Germany commends the Namibian government for its efforts in further advancing human rights, exemplified by Namibia's progress in increasing life expectancy and gender equality, expanding primary education, as well as decreasing maternal mortality and mother-to-child HIV transmission. Germany recommends to 1. Increase the speed at which new human rights legislation is drafted and adopted, and to reduce the burden on the Ombudsman. 2. Enhance efforts to combat gender-based violence, teenage pregnancies, and child marriages by adequately funding corresponding legislative acts and operationalizing the gender-based violence information management system nationally. 3. Improve protection for LGBTIQ+ persons through anti-discrimination legislation. 4. Revise the Financial Intelligence Act to allow for easier financing of CSOs. We wish Namibia a successful review. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Ghana.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ghana warmly welcomes Namibia to this review and thanks the delegation for its national report. Ghana commends Namibia for its remarkable gender equality milestone, particularly the election of women as president, vice president, speaker of the National Assembly, and a cabinet with 57% female majority. Ghana also welcomed the launch of the 6th National Development Plan, the approval of the Universal Health Coverage Policy, and the commitment to free tertiary education. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, Ghana recommends to the government of Namibia to 1. Expedite the enactment of the torture bill to bring domestic law fully in line with the Convention Against Torture. 2. Operationalize the Access to Information Act 2022 and the Whistleblower Protection Act 2017 to strengthen accountability and civic space. 3. Strengthen reforms to ensure that all children with disabilities have access to inclusive education. Ghana wishes Namibia every success in this UPR process. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Greece.
Thank you, Mr. President. Greece welcomes the delegation of Namibia to the 4th UPR cycle. We commend the progress achieved since the previous review, including the implementation of awareness-raising initiatives on gender-based violence and the development of the 3rd National Gender Equality and Equity Policy for 2025-2035. Greece would like to recommend that Namibia, 1. Strengthen efforts to raise awareness and provide training to law enforcement officials on the prohibition of torture and ill treatment, and ensure the investigation and prosecution of alleged perpetrators. 2. Ensure the effective implementation of relevant legislation to combat trafficking in persons and intensify awareness-raising efforts aimed at encouraging the reporting of trafficking in women and girls. 3. Continue efforts to develop a comprehensive national strategy to end child marriage and strengthen child protection systems. Greece wishes Namibia a successful review. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Guyana.
Guyana joined others in warmly welcoming the Honorable Philemon Emmanuel, Minister of Justice and Labor Relations, and his delegation, and expresses our appreciation for their comprehensive report. We commend the government of Namibia on important developments and activities supported by the government since their last review. In a spirit of constructive engagement, Guyana proposes the following. Take measures to eliminate all forms of discrimination, especially against indigenous peoples. Take measures to ensure equitable access to healthcare and education and employment. intensify efforts to raise awareness of and to encourage reporting of trafficking in women and girls, provide adequate sanitation facilities, and ensure access to menstrual products for all women and girls, and develop strategies to encourage women and girls' participation in non-traditional fields of study. Guyana wishes the delegation of Namibia every success during this process. Thank you, President.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Haiti.
Monsieur le Président,
President, welcome the delegation of Namibia and commend their commitment to this fourth review cycle. I also commend the progressive empowerment of women in the political, administrative, and decision-making spaces. My delegation welcomes the measures adopted by Namibia for the protection and enjoyment of human rights by its population, in particular the entry into force of the 2013 law on water management and adoption of the 2024 law on the dissolution of marriages and the 2024 law on marriage. In a constructive spirit, my delegation recommends to Namibia to take measures to combat all forms of discrimination, including discrimination based on racial, ethnic origin, and based on migratory status. I wish Namibia every success in this review. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Iceland.
Thank you, Mr. President. Iceland welcomes the delegation of Namibia and its national report. In the spirit of constructive engagement, Iceland recommends the following. 1. Strengthen existing legal and policy frameworks to prevent and respond to gender-based violence. 2. Legalize abortion under all circumstances. 3. Ensure access to comprehensive sexuality education in and out of school settings. 4. Eradicate child marriage. 5. Amend anti-discrimination legislation to include SOGIESC as prohibited grounds for discrimination. 6. Legalize same-sex marriage between consenting adults. 7. Introduce a transparent administrative self-identification process for legal gender recognition, free from intrusive requirements. We wish Namibia all success for its review. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of India.
Mr. President, India warmly welcomes the delegation of Namibia and thanks them for the presentation of the national report. We appreciate the steps taken by Namibia towards the promotion and protection of human rights, including the government's announcement to fully subsidize tuition and registration fees at all state-run universities and vocational training centers from 2026. In the spirit of constructive engagement, India recommends the following to Namibia. 1. Increase professional training and vocational opportunities for women and girls to reduce unemployment and enhance their participation in the formal economy. 2. Intensify efforts to address the shortage of classrooms and basic facilities in schools, particularly to enhance access to quality education in rural areas. And 3. Strengthen healthcare infrastructure in rural and remote areas to ensure equitable access to quality medical services and further improve maternal and child health outcomes. India will continue to support Namibia in these efforts through various capacity building programs. We wish Namibia a successful UPR review. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Indonesia commends Namibia's continued commitment to human rights, good governance, and sustainable development. We congratulate Namibia for its strong governance performance and the historic election of its first female president. We welcome Namibia's adoption of various social policy initiatives, including the 2024 Universal Health Coverage Policy, which seeks to ensure equitable access to healthcare for all. To support the advancement of human rights in Namibia, we recommend that Namibia, 1. Ratify the International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers and Members of Their Families. 2. Continue strengthening the implementation of Universal Health Coverage Policy with particular attention to sustainable financing and access to quality healthcare. 3. Ensure that its affordable housing facilities construction program covers all Namibians without discrimination to advance the right to adequate housing for all. Finally, we wish Namibia every success in its UPR. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Iran.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Islamic Republic of Iran welcomes the delegation of Namibia. We commend Namibia's notable progress, including the launch of National Development Plan 6, focusing on economic recovery, human development, and sustainable growth, and the entry into force of the Water Act in 2023. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, we offer the following recommendations. 1, continue effective implementation of NDP 6 and the social protection policy to further reduce poverty and inequalities. 2, expand universal health care coverage and quality healthcare services, particularly in rural areas. 3, enhance access to safe drinking water and sanitation with priority to rural communities in line with the findings of 2023 census. We wish Namibia a successful review. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Iraq.
شكرا السيد الرئيس. نرحب برئيس وأعضاء وفد ناميبيا المشارك في الجولة الرابعة
I wish a warm welcome to the delegation of Namibia to this fourth cycle of the UPR, and we thank the delegation for the presentation of their report. In a constructive spirit, we recommend to 1, endeavour to protect children from all dangers and from digital dangers and to improve the quality of life. 2, to endeavour to reduce poverty in rural areas. 3, to combat trafficking in persons, in particular women and children. President, we commend the efforts deployed by Namibia to combat AIDS, in particular amongst women and girls, and we wish Namibia every success.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Ireland.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ireland welcomes the delegation of Namibia and expresses thanks for its presentation today. Ireland appreciates Namibia's efforts to advance human rights domestically and commends progress made since the last UPR cycle. We welcome the Namibian High Court's decision to officially decriminalize consensual same-sex relations in June of 2024. Ireland commends Namibia's continued leadership at both regional and global level in advancing women's political representation. Ireland remains concerned about the high rate of gender-based violence in Namibia and the limited access for women to protection orders, reparation, shelters, and psychological treatment and counseling. Ireland recommends the Namibia, 1, ensures that policies, including the third National Gender Equality and Equity Policy, are effectively implemented to reduce gender-based violence and to protect women's and girls' rights, including through the provision of sufficient resources to support victims and survivors. 2, adopts and implements the provision of the Mental Health Bill of 2024. We wish Namibia every success in the UPR cycle. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Italy.
Thank you, Mr. President. We thank the distinguished delegation of Namibia for their presentation and commitment to the UPR. Italy welcomes the recent approval of the third National Gender Equality and Equity Plan and warmly encourages its effective implementation, supported by an adequate public budget. Italy offers Namibia the following 2 recommendations. 1, ratify the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degraded treatment or punishment. 2, strictly enforce national law prohibiting child marriage and fully align domestic legislation to international standards. Distinguished delegates, how far has the state progressed in increasing the participation of ethnic communities in decision-making processes, particularly those affecting their land? We wish Namibia a most successful review, and I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Jordan. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Kenya.
Kenya warmly welcomes the Namibian delegation led by the Minister of Justice and Labor Relations and further welcomes the comprehensive national report. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, Kenya offers the following 2 recommendations for kind consideration. 1, to continue strengthening measures to prevent and respond to gender-based violence, including enhancing access to justice and support services for victims, particularly in rural and marginalized areas. 2, to sustain efforts towards the effective implementation of universal health coverage and inclusive social protection programs with a view to addressing remaining challenges related to poverty, unemployment, and equitable access to basic services. We wish the delegation of Namibia a more successful review session. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Kiribati.
Thank you, Mr. President. Kiribati welcomes the distinguished delegation of Namibia and thanks them for the presentation of the national report and constructive engagement in the UPR process. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, Kiribati would like to make the following recommendations. 1. Continue to strengthen measures to ensure that all children have access to quality health services and to reduce infant mortality rates. 2. Increase funding for legal aid and ensure women have effective access to justice throughout the country. 3. Take further measures to accelerate gender parity at national and local levels of government, particularly at the judiciary and public service. We wish Namibia every success in the review process. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Kuwait.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. يرحب وفد بلادي برئيس.
Thank you, President. We wish a warm welcome to the delegation of Namibia. We commend Namibia's efforts recently, those stressed in the national report, such as adoption of the universal healthcare coverage policy. We recommend as follows: 1, pursue efforts to promote healthcare services and guarantee their sustainability by consolidating the healthcare system, by facilitating access to the different social groups. 2, redouble efforts on education, develop existing policies to guarantee sustainable education and equitable access to education for all. We wish Namibia every success in this review. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Lao People's Democratic Republic.
Mr. President, the Lao PDR warmly welcomes the delegations of Namibia and appreciates the presentations of its national report. The Lao PDR commends Namibia for continued commitments to promote and protect human rights of its citizens through legislative reforms, and welcome Namibia ratifications of ILO Convention number 156 on worker with family responsibility in August 2025. In a spirit of constructive engagement, my delegation would like to propose 2 recommendations. First, enhance its efforts to implement the Social Protection Policy 2021 to 2030, which aims to reduce poverty and inequalities, improve the livelihoods of the people, particularly women, children, and persons with disabilities. Second, strengthen the national policies to empower youth through education, skill development, and domestic employment opportunity. We wish Namibia a successful reviews. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Latvia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Latvia welcomes the delegation of Namibia to the UPR working group and thanks it for presenting the national report on the progress made in implementing the recommendations from the 3rd review. Latvia would like to make the following recommendations. 1, to take all appropriate measures to combat gender-based violence and domestic violence. 2, to ensure full protection of freedom of expression and peaceful assembly, both online and offline. 3, to ratify the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. 4, to extend a standing invitation to all special procedures mandate holders of the Human Rights Council. Latvia wishes the delegation of Namibia success in the review. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Lebanon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Lebanon welcomes the distinguished delegation of Namibia and commends the progress achieved in promoting the right to health, as well as its commitment to climate action through various initiatives. In a spirit of constructive dialogue, Lebanon makes the following recommendations. First, consider ratifying the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture with a view to establishing a national preventive mechanism.
Second, increase funding for legal aid and ensure that women have effective access to justice throughout the country. Third, amend the Combating of Trafficking in Persons Act to strengthen the protection of victims and enhance measures for the early identification and referral of child victims of trafficking to appropriate services. In conclusion, Lebanon wishes Namibia every success in the outcome of its Universal Periodic Review. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Lesotho.
Mr. President, the Kingdom of Lesotho welcomes the delegation of Namibia and appreciates its continued engagement with the UPR process. We applaud Namibia for its achievements in promoting the right to education, particularly in subsidizing tuition and registration fees at public universities and vocational training centers to enhance access to higher education for all. In the spirit of constructive engagement, Lesotho recommends Namibia to 1. Enhance its efforts to address the excessive use of force by law enforcement agencies. 2. Accelerate the adoption of legislative reforms such as those pertaining to gender equality and prohibition of torture in line with international human rights standards. 3. Step up its efforts to fight injustice and discrimination, especially that affecting indigenous peoples and other vulnerable groups in terms of access to jobs, healthcare, and education. We wish Namibia a successful review. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Libya.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We would like to welcome the Namibian delegation and would like to thank them for their comprehensive report and a constructive cooperation spirit. We recommend the following. First, to take all measures in the field of investigating human rights abuses, especially allegations regarding law enforcement staff. Second, to have assigned prisons for juvenile delinquents. Third, to quickly adopt the law against torture. Finally, we would like to wish them success in this review.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Lithuania.
Thank you, Mr. President. Lithuania welcomes the delegation of Namibia and positively notes the steps taken by Namibia since the last UPR cycle, particularly in strengthening the promotion and protection of the rights of the child. We note Namibia's cooperation with the UN treaty bodies and the UN special procedure mandate holders proven by recent country visits. Lithuania proposes the following recommendations. 1. Issue a standing invitation to all the UN special procedure mandate holders. 2. Continue strengthening measures for the early identification of child victims to prevent them from trafficking or exploitation. 3. Foster the inaction of the data protection bill in line with the international standards. 4. Intensify efforts to ensure access to quality, compulsory, and universal education to every child, particularly by increasing the number of learning facilities in the rural areas. We wish Namibia all success in the current UPR. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Malawi.
President, Malawi warmly welcomes the Republic of Namibia to this review and thanks the esteemed delegation for the comprehensive report. Malawi notes the progress made in the promotion and protection of human rights since the last review and commends the government of Namibia for giving human rights special attention, as reflected in the good strides made towards ratifying of core international human rights treaties and some of the optional protocols thereto. We further commend Namibia for enacting the Education Act, which prohibits corporal punishment in school. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, Malawi makes the following recommendations to Namibia. 1. Consider ratifying the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance. 2. Continue with efforts to fully adopt a human rights-based approach to disability, including by aligning relevant policies with international standards. And 3. Continue cooperating with UN human rights mechanisms. We wish the Republic of Namibia all the best at this review. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. And I'll give the floor to the distinguished representative of Malaysia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Malaysia thanks Namibia for the presentation of its national report. We commend Namibia for undertaking numerous initiatives to promote and protect human rights since the last UPR cycle. In the spirit of constructive engagement, Malaysia recommends the following. First, strengthen the implementation of the CRPD through improved institutional coordination, strengthen enforcement, and increase capacity across relevant authorities. Second, enhance inclusive education for persons with disabilities through strengthened teacher capacity in inclusive and special education, improve accessibility of schools, and the provision of appropriate learning support. And third, take further measures to address barriers faced by girls in accessing education, including menstrual hygiene management, early pregnancy, and school safety. We wish Namibia a successful review. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Maldives.
Thank you, Mr. President. We warmly welcome the delegation of Namibia to this fourth cycle review and thank the delegation for its presentation today. We commend Namibia for its efforts to strengthen its human rights framework, including the implementation of the National Gender Equality and Equity Policy 2025 to 2035. In a constructive spirit, the Maldives makes the following recommendations. 1. Strengthen efforts to ensure inclusive and equitable access to quality education for all, particularly for children with disabilities. 2. Intensify efforts to prevent and respond to violence against women and girls, including gender-based violence, by strengthening protection, access to justice, and survivor support services. 3. Ensure women's equal access to financial services, including bank loans, mortgages, and other forms of credit in order to enhance their economic empowerment and participation. The Maldives wishes Namibia a successful review. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Mali.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mali wishes a warm welcome to the delegation of Namibia. My delegation hails the Namibian government's efforts to improve access and quality of the educational system following its launch in August 2025 of the national campaign for rehabilitation of school establishments in order to give them more adequate infrastructure, including functional sanitary facilities, labs, and other key equipment. My delegation commends significant progress made by the government in combating vertical transmission of HIV and hepatitis B from mother to child, whose transmission rate on the last 2 decades has fallen less than 4%. In a constructive spirit, we recommend develop a strategy to reduce school dropout, especially for girls due to teen pregnancy, and 2, support consolidation of results achieved in preventing and combating HIV following the suspension of the pullout of international financing for a number of donors. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Malta.
Thank you, Mr. President. Malta welcomes the delegation of Namibia. Malta commends Namibia in its continued efforts to implement its international human rights commitments, including through the National Gender Equality and Equity Policy. Malta also welcomes Namibia's strong record on press and media freedom, ranked by the World Press Freedom Index as 28th of 180 countries globally, and the enactment of Access to the Information Act of 2022. We would like to make the following recommendations. 1. Ratify the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance. 2. Draft a comprehensive anti-discrimination legislation, including protections for LGBTIQ+ persons, persons with disabilities, and older persons. 3. Strengthen the protection of the civil rights of LGBTIQ+ persons, including by enacting legislation on marriage equality, civil unions, or registered partnerships. 4. Continue efforts to reduce inequalities in access to healthcare, education, water, sanitation, food security, and housing, particularly in rural areas and informal settlements. We wish Namibia a successful review.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished delegation of Marshall Islands.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Republic of the Marshall Islands welcomes the delegation of Namibia and thanks them for the presentation of the report. We commend Namibia on its initiatives to advance gender equality, women's empowerment, and the participation of women in decision-making and politics, and hope to see these efforts sustained. In particular, we welcome the 2023 launch of the Gender Equality in Politics Project and the subsequent support provided to female members of parliament. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, we recommend the following. 1. Adopt human rights-based and gender-responsive approaches in environmental, climate change, and disaster risk reduction policies. 2, ratify the optional protocol to the CRC on a communications procedure. And 3, strengthen national legislation and policies to ensure access to quality education for all children, especially those in rural areas. We wish the delegation every success during its 4th UPR cycle. Como dada, and I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Mauritania.
Mr. Chair, we would like to welcome the delegation of the Republic of Namibia and we commend their constructive participation in the UPR. We also appreciate their constant cooperation with the UN human rights mechanisms as well as their efforts to promote their legislative and institutional framework to protect and promote human rights. In a constructive spirit, we would like to recommend the following. First, to pursue efforts in order to improve access to quality education and healthcare services, namely for children and persons with disabilities. Second, to pursue the path of institutional and legislative reforms in order to promote social integration and equality, including children, women, and marginalized groups. We would like to wish them success in this UPR. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Mauritius for a video presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Mauritius extends a warm welcome to the delegation of Namibia, a brotherly SADC country during this 4th cycle of the UPR. We commend Namibia for its role in the protection and promotion of human rights and its engagement with the UPR process. We acknowledge the efforts made to combat trafficking in persons, especially women and girls, and to combat cybercrime in a broader effort to build a secure and trusted digital environment. In a constructive spirit, Mauritius recommends that Namibia considers implementing policies to ensure age-appropriate sexual education for adolescents, and finally continues its efforts to subsidizing tuition fees in all state-run universities in Namibia. We wish Namibia a very successful review. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Mexico.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, President. We're grateful to Namibia for presenting the report. We commend approval of the National Action Plan Combating Human Trafficking 2023-27 and progress when it comes to gender equality reflected in the election of President Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah and the high participation of women in senior posts in the state. Constructively and respectfully, Mexico recommends 1, adopt legislative measures to explicitly prohibit corporal punishment of children in the home. 2, ratify ILO Convention 169 and legally recognize indigenous peoples in line with international standards. 3, align legislation to specifically prohibit discrimination on grounds of sexual orientation, identity, and gender expression and sexual characteristics, and implement mechanisms for prevention, reporting, sanction, and reparation. We wish Namibia success in this review cycle. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Montenegro.
Mr. President, Montenegro welcomes the distinguished delegation of Namibia in its constructive engagement with the UPR mechanism. We welcome the progress achieved in reducing poverty and inequalities through enactment of the social protection policy, with particular focus on vulnerable groups such as children and women, and acknowledge the efforts on elimination of early and child marriages. However, Montenegro remains concerned by the treaty body's findings on persisting high rates of discrimination and gender-based violence. We encourage the state to further intensify cooperation with the OHCHR and its human rights mechanisms to reduce inequalities, improve women's rights, and to strengthen effectiveness of the national strategy on ending child marriages. Montenegro recommends to Namibia the following: to enact legislation to decriminalize consensual same-sex relations, to simplify the legal procedure in order to ensure the access of birth registration and identity documents for all children. We wish Namibia a successful UPR cycle, and I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Eswatini.
Thank you, Mr. President. Eswatini thanks the delegation of Namibia for its comprehensive national report, which reflects a consultative and inclusive preparation process. We commend Namibia for continued commitment to the promotion and protection of human rights, particularly its progress in advancing gender equality, including increased representation of women in leadership and the implementation of national gender policies. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, we recommend the following. 1. Enhance efforts to expand inclusive education programs for children with disabilities. 2. Strengthen child protection systems to address trafficking and child labor. 3. Improve equitable access to healthcare services, mostly in underserved areas. Eswatini wishes the Republic of Namibia a successful review. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Nepal.
Mr. President, Nepal warmly welcomes the delegation of Namibia to the fourth cycle of UPR and thanks them for presenting the national report. We appreciate Namibia for its constructive engagements with the human rights instruments and mechanisms. We take positive note of the policy initiatives taken by Namibia, including the third National Gender Equality and Equity Policy, NGEEP 2025-2035, to address gender inequality and improve the livelihoods of women and vulnerable communities. In a constructive spirit, Nepal recommends Namibia the following. 1. Continue measures to promoting gender equality and eliminating gender-based violence. 2. Redouble efforts to ensure universal access to quality education for all. 3. Scale up mitigation and adaptation measures to protect vulnerable communities from impacts of climate change. We wish Namibia a successful UPR. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Netherlands.
The Kingdom of the Netherlands thanks the delegation of Namibia for the presentation of its national report and commends Namibia for its strong democratic institutions, the peaceful conduct of the 2024 elections, and the prominent political representation of women. We also welcome Namibia's continued commitment to multilateralism and the rule of law. The Netherlands notes with concern the persistently high levels of gender-based violence and the pressure on the rights of people based on their sexual orientation and gender identity, including the recent new Marriage Act that risk undermining the constitutional guarantees of non-discrimination. In the spirit of constructive cooperation, the plan to prevent and combat gender-based violence with a special focus on access to shelters, psychological and legal support, and effective investigation and prosecution of perpetrators. 2. Ensures that all legislation is fully in line with the Constitution and international human rights obligations by guaranteeing non-discrimination on all grounds, including sexual orientation and gender identity, and by protecting human rights defenders working on advancing equal rights for LGBTIQ+ persons. The Netherlands wishes Namibia success with the follow-up of all recommendations it receives during this UPR cycle. Thank you, President.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Nigeria.
Thank you, Mr. President. Nigeria warmly welcomes the delegation of the broader Republic of Namibia. Nigeria positively notes Namibia's progress in strengthening the protection of children. We also commend efforts to improve the social economic well-being of its people through expanded social protection, improved access to health and education, and enhanced support for older persons, children, and persons with disabilities. While recognizing these laudable achievements, Nigeria constructively recommends that Namibia, 1, consider ratifying the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture, 2, ratify the Convention on the Rights of All Migrant Workers and Members of their Families, and 3, strengthen efforts to improve the justice system, including legal aid and access to justice. Finally, Nigeria wishes Namibia every success in its review. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Oman.
Thank you, Mr. President. We welcome the friendly delegation of Namibia. We appreciate the efforts made in preparing the report in a participatory manner. We also commend the positive interaction with the UPR. We have reviewed the report and pay tribute to the measures taken to uphold the institutional framework for human rights by activating the role of the Joint Ministerial Committee and adopting policies and national plans to combat poverty and non-discrimination. Our recommendations One, pursue support to economic empowerment programs and vocational training, especially in rural areas, which would help reduce social gaps. Two, enhance programs and policies to improve access to affordable housing, especially for low-income categories. In conclusion, we wish Namibia all success.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Panama.
Señor Presidente.
President, my country congratulates and welcomes the distinguished delegation from Namibia in the context of this fourth UPR cycle. Panama recognizes the significant progress reflected in the national report, particularly in the promotion of free education and the strengthening of healthcare services. In a constructive and cooperative vein, the Republic of Panama recommends the following. First, strengthen compulsory schooling policy, ensuring infrastructure that is equitable in rural areas in collaboration with international technical organizations. Secondly, redouble efforts to reduce maternal mortality, ensuring universal access to health, reproductive quality healthcare services. Thirdly, promote women's access to financial services and economic opportunities on an equal footing. Panama wishes the delegation of Namibia all the best in the implementation of the accepted recommendations. Thank you, President.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Paraguay.
Gracias, Presidente. Thank you, President. We greet Namibia and thank it for the report. We appreciate efforts made concerning the implementation of previous recommendations, particularly ratification of Convention 156 from the ILO. We respectfully recommend, one, to continue considering ratification of key international human rights treaties that are pending in line with the recommendation made previously. Two, redouble efforts to strengthen response to trafficking in women and girls on the basis of stepping up awareness raising for reporting cases and working with countries of origin, transit and destination. Three, step up efforts to ensure equality of access for women to financial credit, grants, training and support for learning and entrepreneurship and access to land, and ensure rural women access to basic healthcare services. Four, continue to strengthen its interministerial human rights and humanitarian law committee, considering the possibility of receiving cooperation to do this. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Philippines.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Philippines warmly welcomes the distinguished delegation of Namibia. We commend Namibia for its consistent and constructive engagement with the UN human rights mechanisms, including the UPR. We further acknowledge its progress in strengthening social protection, poverty reduction measures, and gender policy frameworks. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, allow us to offer the following recommendations. One, endeavor to allocate adequate resources for the effective implementation of laws and policies on combating gender-based violence, with particular focus on survival-centered protection, access to justice, and accountability. Two, continue to enhance mechanisms for child rights protection by fully implementing the Child Care and Protection Act with special attention to addressing violence against children and child marriage, as well as ensuring universal birth registration. And three, sustain human rights education for law enforcement and expand the same to include the judiciary and other public officials. In closing, the Philippines wishes Namibia successful review. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Portugal.
Thank you, Mr. President. Portugal expresses its gratitude to the delegation of Namibia for the presentation of its national report. We welcome Namibia's continued efforts to enhance the human rights situation in the country, including by addressing gender-based violence and promoting women's participation through the development of the national gender equality and equity policy, as well as by adopting legislation aimed at strengthening civil registration, legal identity, and access to documentation, thereby helping to reduce risks of statelessness. Portugal respectfully recommends that Namibia considers ratifying the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman, or Degrading Treatment or Punishment. Portugal wishes Namibia a successful review. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Qatar.
Thank you, Mr. President. We welcome the delegation of Namibia and we thank it for the information provided with regards to implementing recommendations they accepted in the last cycle. We take note of the efforts made to achieve free education as well as the policy of universal health coverage. Our delegation submits the following recommendations: intensify efforts to provide quality education to all children, including children with disabilities. 2, to provide the necessary resources to the Office of the Ombudsperson in order to be able to undertake its mandate in accordance with the Paris Principles. 3, continue policies and measures to support the family as the basic and natural unit of society. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Romania.
Mr. President, Romania welcomes the delegation of Namibia and wishes it a successful outcome of this review. We appreciate Namibia's engagement with the UPR process and the efforts and progress made since the last review, including with regard to the strengthening the access to education and in addressing gender-based violence. Romania constructively recommends Namibia to 1. Scale up the implementation of national plans and social protection measures aimed at addressing the social inequalities and the high unemployment and poverty rate, especially among young people. 2. Ensure access to inclusive and quality education for all children with disabilities and expand the provision of quality multilingual education, particularly for children belonging to indigenous or ethnic minorities. 3. Take actions to mitigate the climate change impacts on persons in vulnerable and marginalized situations. Romania encourages the national authorities to keep further their commitments to human rights protection and to continue implementing the recommendation addressed throughout the UPR process. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Russian Federation.
Thank you, President. We thank the delegation of Namibia for the presentation of the report, and we welcome the consistent efforts to improve and protect human rights systems in the Republic. We note that since the last UPR cycle, the country has managed to achieve tangible results, including Namibia acceding to a series of conventions of the ILO and financing the institution of the Ombudsman. We'd also positively evaluate the sufficient quality of penitentiary establishments, including for minors that now exist in Namibia. We recommend to Namibia to work on legislative basis to prevent torture and to comply with international obligations in this sphere. Second, to adopt measures to achieve better access of the population to sanitation and water, drinking water, and thirdly, to accede to the Convention Against Statelessness. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Rwanda.
Mr. President, Rwanda welcomes the high-level delegation of Namibia and thanks them for comprehensive oral presentation of the national report. We commend Namibia for launch of social protection policy, which aims to address risks and vulnerabilities faced by all citizens to reduce poverty and inequalities. Rwanda further applauds the establishment of a strong foundation for universal health coverage and its implementation policy plan in 2024 that expanded services coverage and improved health outcomes. In a spirit of constructive dialogue, Rwanda recommends Namibia to 1. Continue strengthening efforts to inclusive and free education by expanding targeted support such as mobile schools and skills-based programs to ensure that all children have access and benefit from quality education. Strengthen efforts to prevent and address gender-based violence by scaling up prevention, improving survivors' support, and ensuring access to justice. We wish Namibia a successful review. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Sao Tome and Principe.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sao Tome and Principe warmly welcomes the delegation of Namibia and thanks for the presentation of its report. São Tomé and Príncipe acknowledge the efforts to strengthen its legislative framework, notably through the recent adaptation of laws relating to marriage and civil identity, as well as the progress made in access to education and health. We also commend the country's continued engagement with international human rights mechanisms. We recognize that there remains opportunities to further consolidate these achievements, particularly in strengthening the legislative framework, promoting equality, and continue to enhance the institutions responsible for the protection of human rights, including in the areas of justice and security. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, São Tomé and Príncipe propose the following two recommendations. One, to continue efforts to strengthen and implement the legislative framework in the field of human rights, including measures that promote equality and non-discrimination. Two, to further reinforce institutional capacities in the justice and security sectors, promoting good practice in line with international standards. São Tomé and Príncipe wishes Namibia every success in this review.
I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Gabon.
Thank you, President.
Thank you, President. The delegation of Gabon wishes Namibia all the very best in its UPR and thanks them for the presentation of the national report. Since the last review, Namibia has moved forwards with the promotion and protection of human rights through the adoption of policies and laws relating to that, as well as establishing institutions underlying them. In this regard, we take note with satisfaction of the implementation of the National Plan to Combat Trafficking in Human Beings 2023 to 2027 and of national guidance mechanisms in the sphere of trafficking. Nonetheless, because of the challenges that remain and for a constructive dialogue, we recommend that Namibia do the following. One, step up its efforts to combat trafficking in human beings by strengthening victim protection. Two, ensure for women and girls who are victims of GBV effective access to protection measures and reparation. We wish all the best to Namibia for this review. Thank you, President.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Botswana.
Mr. President, Botswana commends Namibia for its continued engagement with the Universal Periodic Review process. We further applaud Namibia for its positive developments aimed at advancing the rights and well-being of indigenous peoples, including through reserved quota for indigenous peoples and marginalized communities at the University of Namibia and Namibia University of Science and Technology. Botswana is inspired by this approach as we continue to intensify our own efforts to uphold and advance the rights and well-being of indigenous communities in Botswana. To support these positive developments, Botswana recommends that Namibia, one, takes the necessary measures to increase the representation of all indigenous peoples in government structures and public administration. Two, obtains free, prior and informed consent of the indigenous people concerned before adopting and implementing measures that might affect them. Three, consider extending a standing invitation to special procedures of the Human Rights Council. Botswana wishes Namibia a successful review outcome. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, this was the last speaker on my list. I now give the floor to His Excellency Philemon Wise Emmanuel, Minister of Justice and Labor Relations of Namibia, to address observations and comments and to make final remarks. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And I would like to thank everybody that found it appropriate to make some recommendation or to react to our national report. And we appreciate the comments and the recommendations that you have sponsored thus far. Mr. President, I think I want to remain within the framework that I started with at the very beginning. And it's really one of looking at what are the recommendations that are falling within the legislative framework and what are those recommendations that are again speaking to state policy, which would clearly find refuge under Article 95 of the Namibian Constitution, as I have indicated earlier. I think it's also important to note, Mr. President, that most of the recommendations are edging on the recommendations that were addressed or were given during the first round of engagement. Issues pertaining to the ratifications of the conventions against torture, cruel and inhuman treatment. I think I have spoken to that already, that in terms of our constitutional order, we are already committing to those principles, that we do not allow any of our citizens or anybody that found himself or herself on our land to be subjected to inhuman treatment. And therefore, as a result of that, we can only accept, or any recommendations that bother us on that can only enjoy our support. The issues pertaining to the data laws and information bill, I think ED Mate has spoken to that already, to say this specific bill, the data protection bill specifically, it's in making, and we are expecting that either in the current financial year or in the subsequent financial year, this particular bill will then make its way to the parliamentary floor. Hence, again, any recommendations that bother us on that, we can only accept it. Ombudsman bill, we have spoken to it quite extensively, indicating that it's well aligned with the Paris principle. And I indicated that it will actually make its way to Parliament in no time. Issues pertaining to corporal punishments, as well as child marriage bill. I think those are again issues that are already prohibited in terms of our constitution. And I think it's important just to indicate that in terms of the majority age in our country, so any contract, including the contract of marriage, can only be valid in terms of, in the eyes of our law, if it's concluded between two major, and that is to say that the party to any of that contract for it to be valid is when it's entered into between individuals that are above the age of 18. Yes, the recommendation for us to speed up our legislative speed, I think we can accept that. Issues of review of the Financial Intelligence Act, I think today, maybe I may have missed why exactly that was a recommendation, but I think we can defer that one so that we look at the recommendations or the angle from which the recommendation is coming from. Other issues really are ones that are speaking to there was an issues on the mental health bill. I must indicate that this bill has already been actually debated. It's already on the parliamentary floor. So, and I think before we closed on Thursday last week, this was one of the bill that was eminent, for passing. I don't know. I will give a floor to Honorable Shifeta, because I was not in that session, but it was due for passing on Thursday last week already. So commitment to invitations of the mandate holder, I think we have already laid ourselves bare insofar as our readiness is concerned in allowing that to happen. Other issues are really ones that falls under state policy, such as issues of enhancing access to education, improving the schooling infrastructures, putting in place policies that aim at addressing climate change. All those issues are already in any event contained in our aspiration under Article 95 of the Namibian constitutions. But we are grateful that you have again just reminded us that we probably need to just give speed to those aspirations. But I think, Mr. President, there is one elephant in the room that we must address because it keeps coming up. And this is the issue of the same-sex marriage. It's important for us first to demystify the misconception. Namibia, or the Namibian Supreme Court, has not decriminalized the same-sex marriage. What the Namibian Supreme Court did, it was simply to indicate that same-sex marriages lawfully concluded outside Namibia, must be recognized. And that was for the purpose for immigration and residential purposes of those parties that took the government to court in respect of that. As it stands in terms of under the Namibian law, there is no recognition of same-sex marriage. So I think that perhaps we should indicate, or we should leave it cleared, so that everybody knows what the Namibian positions with regard to that. But I also want to add that I think we all know, we all know that there is no universally recognized fundamental right to same-sex marriage. There's no universally recognized the fundamental right to same-sex marriage. What is recognized, and even worse, the international human rights instrument, including those that are governed by the UN, none of them has explicitly guaranteed the right to same-sex marriage. What the instrument provide for, its right to dignity, right to equality, and right to non-discrimination. And those rights, right to equality, right to dignity, and right to non-discrimination, in terms of how they are to be applied in various countries, these are subjects of interpretation. How various countries have gone about same-sex marriage, some considering as a right and some not, it's really dependent on the constitutional order of a given country, or the judicial guidance that the courts of that specific country may provide. But I think we also need to realize that we are facing an issue, we are facing a tensions between international human right expectation vis-a-vis the democratic processes. Because in many countries, and I'm speaking with authority and confidence in respect of my own country, law are shaped by the citizens of the country. The citizens of a given country are to indicate what kind of laws they want to be in place. And the Namibian lawmaking process is one that is consultative, where we consult our citizens on any piece of legislation that we come up with. Last year alone, when our current president took office, she gave a directive to the Ministry of, or to my ministry, that of Justice and Labor Relations, to run an public invitation, inviting public members on the kind of laws that must be amended, on the kind of laws that government must focus on coming up with, and those laws that the government must abolish. We received proposals and input and views from members of the public on the kind of laws that we must put in place. Among those submissions, we have not received any single input suggesting that we should then pass a law that institutionalize the same-sex marriage. We are therefore sitting with a democratic reality that we must face. The expectations of, or the tensions of the international human rights expectation vis-a-vis the democratic governance on another hand. And I think in the constructive engagement such as this one, we must be very frank and be able to have some form of indulgence toward one another, so that at least if we are to move in a particular direction, we are allowed to do so gradually and through wide consultation, and when necessary, reform must be delayed in balancing of various interests. I thought I should conclude with that, but I want to give the floor to Honorable Shfeta. He had just stepped out earlier when we were addressing questions to the first round. So maybe also to speak to the issue to where Parliament has ended with the mental health bill. Honorable Shfeta.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We had a session on last week, because before we rise for a break, and that last day we were dealing with a mental health bill, and most of the parts has been cleared, and we are only left with a very small technical things that has to be done. When we resume session, we'll definitely clear that and sail it in Parliament, in the National Assembly. Then it goes to the review, House of Review. But that has addressed some of the things, most all, if not all, things that many concerns were raised here. So I think that's where we ended. But basically, everything agreed upon. It's just a matter of now just refining those recommendations by the National Assembly in the last session, and then we can sail it when it comes to the next session after recess. Thank you.
I thank I thank His Excellency, the Minister and the delegation of Namibia for the presentation and participation in this review. The report of the review will be prepared by members of the Troika, namely the representatives of Bulgaria, Egypt, and Italy. In accordance with the procedure implemented in 2015, the recommendation section of the report is scheduled for distribution on Wednesday, May 6th at 6 p.m. In addition, let me recall that in accordance with Presidential Statement OS/19/1 adopted on 8 December 2025, the recommendation section of all reports of the working group will be considered for adoption in the afternoon of the final day of the session. That is to say, on Friday, 15 May, beginning at 2:30 p.m. The full report, including the summary section, will be distributed by email on Friday, 22 May 2026. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, this brings us to the end of our meeting. We will reconvene this afternoon at 2:30 p.m. for the review of the Niger. Speaking time will be 1 minute and 10 seconds for all. You are reminded that inscribed speakers who wish to withdraw from the list are kindly invited to use the online events platform for withdrawal at least 30 minutes before the start of the review. I hereby close the first meeting of the 52nd session of the UPR Working Group, and I wish all of you a nice lunch. The meeting is adjourned.